Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the For the Record podcast. I am joined by Axel to discuss Better Call Saul, the prequel spin-off to Breaking Bad, one of the most critically acclaimed television shows of all time. It's great having you back on the show, Axel. Welcome.
It's good to be back.
So before we kick things off, Axel and I did a podcast on Breaking Bad a few months ago, where he finally got around to watching it for the first time after I nagged him for years. I highly recommend checking that one out first, and then coming back to this one to get the full experience. Okay, so Axel, you finally watched Breaking Bad. Now we're moving on to Better Call Saul. We did touch on it a bit in our Breaking Bad podcast. What were your thoughts heading in to this prequel spin-off series? Were you skeptical?
I wouldn't say I was skeptical, but as previously stated, I definitely was like, it's fucking weird that they gave the woohoo wacky, lawyer man 60 additional hours of fucking TV show. And I was just wondering what the hell it was going to be about and if it was just going to be court cases of him doing funny stuff. I don't know. It just always seemed like a weird idea. The lawyer spinoff, I was like, okay, sure, I'll give it a shot. I like lawyers. I like law stuff. I used to be in mock trial in high school. I like Phoenix Wright. So I just wanted to see what they were gonna do with that, especially since they knocked it out of the park with Breaking Bad. So I felt like I had to give it a shot.
Well, I think I finished Breaking Bad roughly around the same time Better Call Saul was starting. I basically gave it like no attention. I just pretended it never existed. Not because I was like not interested in it whatsoever, but more so I just wanted to wait for the show to finish before I even considered watching it. And that's exactly what I did. I started watching it just as it was, as season 6 was airing, and kind of timed my run nicely to finish watching it a few weeks after the finale came out. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I had some concerns going in. I obviously had heard some of the hype around it. I managed to kind of stay spoiler free for the 6-year run, which is impressive with the internet, but I had some concerns because I wasn't a big fan of El Camino at all. I thought it was completely unnecessary and I'd rather it not exist, to be honest.
On that, I mean, I don't agree that it shouldn't exist. This isn't an El Camino podcast, but I didn't like it either.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty bloated and I didn't like any of the flashback scenes, and it's also just
not necessary because Breaking Bad ends and ties everything up perfect.
Yeah, he got away.
And El Camino just we didn't need any of it. So because of El Camino, actually, I was a little skeptical of Better Call Saul because I'm like, okay, why are they making this? Are they just kind of trying to live off the hype of Breaking Bad and cash in on that IP? Or are they actually going to try and make a television show that matches the quality of Breaking Bad? And obviously being a prequel as well, like there's some pretty big concerns with making a prequel spin-off series because we know what happens in the future, right? We know the events of Breaking Bad, so you're limited in terms of like what you can do because we know what Saul becomes, right? We know what happens in this universe. Getting a prequel, like, is it going to be less exciting? Because one of the great things about Breaking Bad is that anticipation of what's going to happen next. And with a prequel, like, do you remove some of that?
It's interesting you say we know what Saul becomes, because initially I had no idea that he had to become Saul, if that makes sense. Yeah. I didn't know that this was a character arc, because initially in Breaking Bad, he's just introduced as this sleazy, wacky lawyer. When I heard it was a prequel, I thought it would just be his adventures or him dealing with other stuff. I never thought it would be...
Me too, yeah. I thought it would just be like some of the other shenanigans he gets into as a lawyer, and it would be like maybe a 1-season kind of spin-off kind of thing. It didn't seem necessary to me to expand on Saul's character. Like, he seemed reasonably like all laid out in Breaking Bad, and we didn't really need to go into his full backstory. And another concern I had is like, Breaking Bad is arguably one of the best TV shows I've ever made, right? Like, we both gave it 100 out of 100. So when it comes to Better Call Saul, like, how do you even match that, right? Why bother making a spin-off series if you can't really match that quality? And well, as it turns out, they managed to do a pretty good job at that. So for the audience, do you want to kick us off, like, how you went about watching Better Call Saul?
Sure. So after you nagged at me for 3.5 fucking years to watch this one TV show. And I finally got around to it, and obviously I enjoyed it. Next on the list was El Camino and Better Call Saul. So I finished El Camino immediately after watching Breaking Bad.
Yep.
I thought it was whatever, meh, But I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was unnecessary, but it did feel like it could have been a 30-minute special or just one more episode would have done it for Jesse, and that's all we really needed. And then to find out we were going to go all the way back to Better Call Saul, I was like, okay, to me this feels like when you watch the original Star Wars, if you watch more, you go to the prequels, right? You know?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what it felt like. I felt like, okay, I want more of this universe. I want more of the happenings, what's going on. And Saul Goodman, I enjoyed his character. So to get more of him, I was like, okay, another 60 episodes. I think it's actually longer than Breaking Bad by a
Yeah,
few
it's
episodes.
much longer than Breaking Bad, which is insane, right? Like a spin-off prequel series ends up, I think, having like 15 or so more episodes than the original. It's hard to comprehend, isn't it?
It's still the case that any type of long form TV show with hour-long episodes is always going to intimidate me because I always think of like, fuck, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Same reason I don't really play a lot of like RPG games. However, I already did it once and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. So I figured, okay, I could do it once, I can do it again. TV's becoming more accessible to me now. I'm not as, afraid, I guess, if you just take it bit by bit.
How different
But
was your like perception heading into Better Call Saul compared to Breaking Bad? Because obviously with Breaking Bad, you had like a bunch of friends, including me, nagging you to watch it, hyping it up, telling you how fucking good it is, how you really need to watch Breaking Bad. With Better Call Saul, like you have Breaking Bad as this kind of geyser to the quality of what to expect. Were you
yeah,
excited? Were you nervous? Like how different was it heading into Better Call Saul compared to Breaking Bad?
I didn't really have expectations for Better Call Saul other than I heard it was good years ago when the first season was airing
Yeah.
by some of my friends, but they all kind of fell off the train. Nobody after, that initial release date, which I don't fucking know when it was, so I can't really speak to that. But I remember that when season 1 came out, some of my friends were saying, "Oh, it's good." And they were talking about it amongst themselves and they would say, "Go watch it. But first go watch Breaking Bad."
Yeah.
But then as the years progressed, it kind of fell off the map and I forgot it existed. And then when I watched Breaking Bad, it was this thing in the horizon. It was this thing I knew existed. I knew this was another part of the story, but it's not like I was eager to get to it or anything. But I also wasn't dismissive of it. It was just there. So
Yeah.
when I finished Breaking Bad, I was like, okay, time to Better Call Saul. But I didn't have higher, short expectations. I just wanted to take it for what it was. It was kind of strange that I didn't hear about it and it wasn't part of like the zeitgeist like Breaking Bad was,
It's insane because Breaking Bad was such a big like cultural phenomenon, right? It was a massive, massive TV show, particularly towards the back end of its run. Better Call Saul, on the other hand, like I was like you, I forgot it existed for like a good few years, and I'd say it wasn't until season 6 that it started to get like mainstream traction again. I'd heard bits and pieces from people like at uni. I'd heard like a few people hype it up. I had a friend who was watching it like season by season, and I asked him like, is it good? Is it as good as Breaking Bad? And he's like, yeah, it's pretty comparable. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because, naturally it has big shoes to fill. So I was quite excited heading in, but I was also like prepared to be skeptical, right? Because Breaking Bad has set an incredibly high bar. So watching Better Call Saul, like it had a lot to live up to for me personally. And I'm always going to nitpick things that I'm passionate about more than just something that, I might not have a preconceived opinion on. For me, like, some of the differences of Better Call Saul compared to Breaking Bad, I actually appreciated more. Let's head into that kind of discussion. So, straight off the bat, I think it's fair to say that Better Call Saul, despite sharing like a ton of similarities, right? We get a lot of returning characters and it's in the same universe and it's dealing with even a lot of the same themes. It feels like a different show despite those similarities.
Yeah, I would agree because I remember when I started watching season 1, I was kind of waiting for a lot of the characters that I knew were going to show up, and they didn't show up till much, much, much later. So it's definitely a slower burn than Breaking Bad in that sense.
For sure.
Because they let the characters marinate. They let them slowly go where they're going
Yeah.
rather than, pushing them along. The story writers, it felt like they were taking more of a planting the seeds kind of approach to the story writing this time around, where they would plant the seeds for what the characters would do
Yeah.
in very, very subtle ways, or who they will become. And the foreshadowing wouldn't happen for 30 or so hours later, in real time. So when it finally paid off, it kind of felt very satisfying in a way, but it also earned. It felt more earned because they let these characters live live in this world longer before a climax happened, you know?
It's a far slower pace than, say, Breaking Bad, right? Like, I think in Breaking Bad's pilot, Walter is selling drugs 40 minutes into the pilot, right? Whereas Jimmy
Yeah.
doesn't become Saul Goodman until very deep into the series, which was quite a big surprise for me. And even then, like, his transformation is super slow. I really appreciated that slower pace in comparison to Breaking Bad. Like, Breaking Bad season 1 is very plot driven. It's very...
Go, go, go.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a lot of plot points happen in each episode. Like, even the pilot, like, think of how much happens in that pilot. Whereas Better Call Saul almost takes, like, a pilot format and expands it over an entire season, right? And it's a lot slower and more methodical. But I actually really enjoyed that approach because, like you said, it's like planting the seeds and letting things marinate. And for that reason, like, a lot of the payoffs feel a lot more richer and more rewarding.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that's why I don't know what to coin them, but I'll call them payoff episodes, right? Where they will set up a lot of character arcs or relationships rather early on, or they'll allude to something and it won't happen for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But when it does, and we get to that payoff episode, that's why those payoff episodes are such a big deal and loved from what I've seen, right? I'm not too deep into the community or anything,
Yeah.
but I've seen like the list of like the best episodes or the episodes that everyone likes. And it's always those payoff ones where everything comes to fruition after a long time of waiting for things to get there. Even if you know where it's going, watching it unfold gives you that catharsis, the release.
Exactly, and I love that Better Call Saul isn't afraid for its arcs to take, you know, multiple seasons in some cases, right? Like, they really take their time, whereas a lesser TV show might kind of have this setup and payoff in the same episode or over just a couple of episodes. A lot of, like, Jimmy's kind of schemes and stuff transpire over, like, a full season of television, right? And it just makes it so more rewarding when we see the different ways that, you know, they navigate the plot that's unfolding. And I'd say another big difference from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad is I think Breaking Bad is like the perfect balance of being mainstream and accessible while also having that like attention to detail and art that a lot of like filmy people can appreciate, right? I think it nails that balance. I'd say Better Call Saul definitely leans down that more artsy kind of
I agree.
execution. It's a lot less mainstream than Breaking Bad. I still think it has like big mainstream appeal, and that's kind of been proven, particularly with like the later seasons as well, for anyone that stuck around. Early on especially, like it really, you know, it appeals to people like us, right, who really appreciate that more nuanced and in-depth and slower, richer experience rather than something that's rushing from plot point to plot point or action set piece and that kind of thing.
I agree with that 1000%. But to me, it's like, oh, I can see how people can find it boring because
Yeah.
the stakes as well are much lower. At least, very, you know, for a long time, I want to say for like the first 3 or 4 seasons, there's rarely a situation in which it's life or death for these characters.
Yeah,
It's a lot more to do with their morality and their decisions and what is right and wrong.
exactly.
But they're not going to die if they make the wrong choice, but they will burn bridges in their relationships with each other. It's
Yeah.
a lot more of a character study in that sense.
Absolutely. That's the biggest difference between Breaking Bad, right? Is like Breaking Bad has those kind of stakes where the characters can die for the mistakes they make, and that kind of conflict is always present throughout the show. Whereas in Better Call Saul, there's so much more of a focus on the characters, and there's more nuanced characters, and it's more about like the characters and their relationships with one another and the themes that are present throughout rather than the actual like conflict of, you know, life or death situations that Breaking Bad was, you know, very famous for. So I can totally understand why like a mainstream viewer might not like this, particularly compared to Breaking Bad. But for people like us, like it ticks a lot of the boxes, right?
Yeah, I feel like I could recommend Breaking Bad to most people I know.
Yeah.
Whereas Better Call Saul, you know, there's less people that I know that will get that in the enjoyment that I got out of it, which
For-
is
for
fair.
sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot less accessible than say a Breaking Bad. But let's move on to the story and characters. So I think we should split this up into two parts. I think there's two distinct halves of Better Call Saul. You have the first half, which is season 1 to 3, which focuses very heavy on Jimmy and his relationship with Chuck. And then we have seasons 4 to 6, which is more so focused on Jimmy's descent and becoming Saul Goodman and the corruption of his morality. So we'll kick things off with season 1 to 3. And I have to say, like, out of the two halves, I think I prefer the first half of Better Call Saul. And I know that might be a slight hot take because I think most people prefer the last 3 seasons. But for me, one of my favorite aspects of the entire show is the relationship that Jimmy has between himself and Chuck, himself and Kim, and himself and Howard, especially in these first 3 seasons and the way it sets everything up.
Yeah, for sure. The first 3 seasons definitely have a lot of maybe not infighting is the word, but like strings and relationships between the cast of characters before other third parties get involved later on in the show. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so I love how well like they set everything up and then it kind of gets flipped on its head later on. Like for example, with Jimmy, he gets established as being this guy with kind of like a heart of gold, always fighting for the little man, but he's got like some scheming ways, but deep down like he is, a good person. And we have Kim who's very much like his sounding board and someone that he can rely on to help guide him to do the right thing. And his relationship with Chuck is like particularly in season 1, it's established as Chuck being like a loving brother for Jimmy that does look out for him. And Howard is the person that's, not letting the little man get his comeuppance, right? And then the way that it kind of flips all of that on its head multiple times throughout, Chuck ends up becoming the antagonist of the series. We realize that Howard was actually not a bad guy at all, and our perception of him, which was Jimmy's perception in season 1, was just completely false. Like he's really set up to be the kind of like antagonist of Jimmy's story arc, right, in season 1. And yeah, once we get that information later on, we can look back on the events of season 1 and realize, well, Howard was actually not really in the wrong at all. And I really love to like just how well they set everything up, but how they weren't afraid to make dramatic changes based on like our evolving perception of these characters.
It's interesting you bring up Howard Hamlin, because to be honest, I never disliked him.
No, I loved him as a character.
Yeah,
I
well,
thought,
I mean, even when Jimmy or the show would like, well, actually, okay, that's a bit of a stretch. He does some things that I definitely disagree with, but within the first, I think it was like the third fucking episode of the show, when Jimmy copies his suit
yeah.
and puts up the billboard, and he gets upset at that,
Yeah.
and Jimmy's like, "Oh, fuck this guy," like he doesn't want to hire me. I kind of didn't get that, because in my head while I was watching it is like, well, Jimmy, like, you don't exactly have a good reputation. Not that he deserves a bad one, but
Yeah.
he doesn't have a good one. And second of all, they didn't want to be accused of nepotism,
Yeah.
or maybe they have higher standards
Yeah.
or something like that. And especially when you copy someone's brand and suits, it makes perfect fucking sense that someone would be upset at that.
I think it's more
So,
so like Jimmy's goal is to become a lawyer, right? And ideally work at HHM. And
mhm.
Howard is set up as being the obstacle in his way. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
that,
yeah, definitely, for sure.
yeah, so that's where he kind of like takes that antagonistic role, even though we learn later on that it was actually Chuck all along. That was
Hmm.
the person standing in his way. And I especially love that. But yeah, like you're saying, I agree. I always loved Howard. I was a Howard fan from dot. Even though, like, on paper, because we're obviously fans of Jimmy as the protagonist, he was still kind of filling that antagonistic void. He was still such like an engaging and entertaining character. I loved every scene that he was in.
Yeah, I will say that there were times when I agreed with Jimmy and Kim, when something that they are not in control of, or something that the characters themselves didn't even know, and he would get upset at them. And it wouldn't be like he would yell at them like an asshole boss, but he would subtly, send Kim to do document reports.
Yeah,
With that, I agree with those characters of like, come on, bro, that's kind of a dick move.
yeah,
There's no way they could have known, but he's the boss of HHM. He has to keep this company in line. So maybe he was trying to be like a tough guy to like keep. He has an image to keep. Just like all the characters, even Chuck being the antagonistic force, when it was revealed that it was him all along,
mm,
there were subtle hints. There were subtle hints, and I thought in the back of my mind, I was like, when he said, "Oh, I might get a job at HHM," and Chuck's like, "Oh, as what?"
Yeah.
Like it was like in the back of my mind, I said, oh, "That's a fucking weird response." I didn't like the way he said that at all. But when it was revealed his true colors, that oh no, I don't like you. I don't want to work with you. I don't even see you as a real lawyer. I'm part of. I kind of sympathize because it makes sense that this guy worked his ass off,
Yeah.
and then it's not fair to like put his brother down, especially if he claims to love him,
Yeah.
and the relationship gets fleshed out with like the relationship they had with their parents. But I don't think any of these characters are entirely wrong. I feel like they fleshed out all of these characters that even if you don't
Exactly.
agree with the decision, you can see how they got there.
Yeah. Is
Yeah, they were.
there's no like good guys, bad guys when it comes to like Jimmy's arc in particular. You can kind of see everyone's perspectives, right? Like Chuck becomes a villain in season 3 definitely, but when you sit back and think about it, especially with what happens in seasons 4, 5 and 6, he's arguably proven right, you know? And then Jimmy, like obviously we're on Jimmy's side, particularly in these first 3 seasons, but when we see what he becomes, it kind of just adds a whole another layer of complexity into their relationship. And look, I want to talk about that a little bit later, but season 1 in particular, I think, is just such a great way to kick the show off. It kind of introduces like a split protagonist system where we get multiple, you know, ensemble characters into the show. I was expecting this to just be all about, you know, Better Call Saul, right? About Saul
Yeah.
Goodman. So it was a big surprise for me to actually learn that Mike was going to be in the show as one of the main characters. I didn't even know he was going to, you know, feature in this spin-off whatsoever. So to see him introduced and then get like even entire episodes dedicated to his arc, I loved it.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. He was definitely one of the best characters in Breaking Bad, which is also really cool because Bob Odenkirk wasn't available, so
Yep.
they had to get Jonathan Banks to fill in, and so
And that's
so
how he
it's
got
kind
the
of
role.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect how now they're like, in the first season, 5-0 is an amazing episode, by the way. Like for him to get
Oh,
his
for sure.
Jonathan Banks killed it, and you can see. I seen some interviews, and he was tearing up, having to say goodbye to Mike
Mm,
Ehrmantraut in Breaking Bad. So to see him get like I don't want to call it like a run back, right? He got a run back, and he got to reprise his role and really flesh out this character
for
and his
sure.
entire backstory from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that's lovely. I thought that was really good, and Nacho as well. Nacho was a surprise for me because I
Me
thought he
too.
was going to be a Tuco like character.
Yep.
So I thought he was just going to be, oh, you have to deal with this guy, and he's like the gang. He's in the game. He's just the prick that comes over to harass our
Yeah.
characters, despite them not wanting to do anything with it. But then also he gets his own layers of complexity throughout, where you're like, oh, okay, I see how you got here. I say the only person who's just straight up like a straight up bad guy, right, is like someone like Tuco, right?
Yep.
Who they're just evil, and they work at like the Disney version of like there's no gray. They just fucking murder people. So of course when they go, you're not upset about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, to like pointing out Nacho as well, like he's a character straight from the get go I was skeptical of. And knowing Michael Mando as well as like Voss in Far Cry 3, the video
Yes.
game, I kind of assumed that he'd be playing, you know, an antagonist. And he's kind of set up to be as a potential bad guy as we get to, you know, learn more about him and see his character arc unfold. He actually becomes one of the most sympathetic characters in the entire show. And going back to Mike as well, like he was reasonably developed in Breaking Bad. Like obviously he wasn't an overly important character. He was developed as much as he needed to be in Breaking Bad, but to actually get to see like his whole backstory and motivations and how he, you know, begins as like trying to do good in a pacifist kind of way, and then how the longer that he works with Gus and how he keeps getting put in these situations where he ultimately does have to turn to violence. I think it was just a really well executed way to establish Mike's character in Breaking Bad by giving us his backstory in Better Call Saul.
I was gonna say it's super interesting that in Breaking Bad, he like the first time we see him, he just goes up to a dead body and tells, he basically tells Jesse to to stop being a little bitch.
Yeah.
And he just goes around icing people like it's nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And to see him go in Breaking Bad of like, no guns, we do this, you know, the non-violent way. I'm just going to bring a pimiento sandwich. It is
Yeah.
kind of jarring because it's like, oh, that's not how you were in this other show. And then they, you know, they set up different starting points and they get to build up from there.
I need to give special shout outs too, though, to Jonathan Banks' performance as Mike Ehrmantraut. I think, like, in Breaking Bad, he's fantastic, but he goes to another fucking level in Better Call Saul. And that monologue that he gives in 5-0, talking about how they killed his baby boy, like, I was sobbing from that. It was an incredible performance and so emotionally raw by Jonathan Banks. Seriously, one of the highlights, performance-wise, of the entire show for me.
I think my favorite monologue of his is now I'm sorry if I don't know what season this is, but it's the episode where they are going to it's not a Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like a grief
Yeah, yeah.
sharing.
And he
I'm
calls
sorry
out
if I
that
don't know what
guy.
it's called. Yeah, he calls out that guy. I really like that monologue because it subtly shows how he deals with his anger at the world
Yeah,
and he takes it off on other people. Just I love how the show shows how every different character reacts to situations in their life and the anger they hold inside.
yeah,
You know, some people like Jimmy joke around and laugh. Gus is like a perfectionist. Like he has things done a certain way. And Mike is just he's so over the bullshit and he wants nothing to do with it. So he just kind of skips to the end and says, nah, fuck this, you know? And for
and
someone who says no half measures, he takes a lot of half measures.
well, I really enjoyed like the ensemble aspect of the show. Like, I think it's Mike's story arc is a great contrast to Jimmy's. You know, where Jimmy has his schemes and it's very much dialogue driven and what is he getting up to, and there's elements of comedy. Whereas Mike is a lot more of a serious character with a serious arc, and we see his different schemes that kind of unfold like Jimmy's schemes, right? Like, I especially love the one where he gets a sniper rifle and shoots the cocaine on the truck, you know, and then seeing the repercussions of that later when an innocent person gets killed and the impact that that has on Mike's character moving forward. Like, I don't know, I think they absolutely nailed balancing these different ensemble storylines and having both an engaging, like, lawyer storyline, but then also having, like, an engaging criminal crime aligned storyline with Mike and then later Gus and Nacho as well. And then seeing those two collide later in the series is great payoff as well.
Yeah, that's another thing I really liked about the season. I know we're talking about seasons 1, 2, and 3, but like how just they combine characters and their matchups. You know how Chuck and Howard Hamlin is a pretty natural combination that you see in the first few seasons, right?
Yeah,
But later on, when like Kim Wexler meets Jesse Pinkman,
yeah,
that combination is like, whoa, what the fuck? I never thought these characters would interact, you know? And we knew Mike and Saul were associates in Breaking Bad, but to see how that started is also just an amazing writing. You know, the writing they did there to make it all seamless is really, really great. I really appreciated the hard work that goes into coming up with these arcs.
for sure. And I think too, the way the show like handles each of its arcs, particularly like I really love in season one Jimmy's arc with the Kettlemans and the way they
Yeah,
handle like side characters as well. Like obviously all of the main characters are incredibly well developed and well thought out with great depth and backstories and stuff. But the way that they also handle these side characters and just make them so incredibly entertaining. Like I loved the Kettleman story arc and I love what it meant for Jimmy's arc as well, where he makes that decision to not take the money and do the right thing. We can kind of see where he is at that point in his character arc, and we can obviously compare that to the events that happen later. But in that moment, like we see Jimmy is still a good guy and he's struggling with this internal struggle of doing the right thing. And the Kettlemans as well, like what an entertaining couple to have in this weird, wacky storyline of like fraud and tax evasion and stealing money.
so I think it's also great that these first few seasons have a lot of standalone story arcs, like the
Yeah,
Kettleman's arc, to start off with. Then we delve a little bit into Tuco.
Yeah.
Then we go into Nacho and like the baseball card stealing fraud.
Another great side character as well. That guy, he's
Fuck
in
that
for.
guy. I hate him with a burning passion of 1,000 splendid suns. I wanted him to get murdered by Nacho or something because he deserved it.
It's
Oh
so
my!
funny though. It's so funny, like having him just ignore Mike's advice and then seeing like what happens. Yeah.
The Kettleman. What's the name of the husband character? He was completely whipped by Betsy Kettleman, which I don't blame. I don't blame him for it. And
Yeah.
by the way.
I mean, Betsy Kettleman kind of be bad, you know.
I would sim too. You know? We stand strong, independent female characters. But that baseball card guy, he was driving me insane. I was relieved when he was out of the show. Cause gosh darn, I was fucking over him and his
I thought he was
antics.
hilarious. I thought he was just the perfect contrast, the same Mike and Nacho, right? You've got these two super serious, no bullshit, man of few word characters, and you're contrasting him with this fucking idiot. I loved it. And he's also in the TV show What We Do in the Shadows, which I'm not too sure if you've heard of it, but it's a comedy series about vampires. And he's a super annoying character in that, so I think he kind of like is typecast now as this idiot kind of character.
Well, he's doing his fucking job well because he annoyed the shit out of me. I'll say that.
For sure. I think season 1 is probably the tightest season in terms of plot, especially when it comes to Jimmy's story arc. Like it's so beautifully structured the way it evolves throughout, where we obviously are introduced to Jimmy and we know his motivations. You know, he's really struggling, right? Like Mike makes him pay for the fucking the parking tickets all the time, and he's struggling to be respected by the people around him. You know, and trying to live up to Chuck's. You know, he wants to make Chuck proud, most importantly, and he wants to become a lawyer, and how the Kettlemans give him an opportunity to try and fulfill that. And I fucking love the ending of season 1. I think of all the seasons, like, okay, maybe season 6, but that's a bit different since that's concluding the entire series. But season 1's ending, where he speeds out, is fucking brilliant, and just such a well-rounded end to season 1.
I was gonna say I agree 100%. When what's his name, Marco? He sings the "Smoke in the Water."
Yeah.
Like he's singing it while they're doing their scams, right?
Yeah.
Now, granted that you get context for that later again, but you see the start of the scams in season 1. You can see how he cuts corners. He makes himself out to be a hero with the guy who slips off the billboard. One of my favorite scenes in the entire series, and I've literally gone back to watch this episode just to rewatch this scene because I enjoy it a lot because it's very subtle. Is when he's just no cucumber water, you know. He's like, "Oh, please sign this paper," and zooms in on his face. He's fucking sweating bullets, and they're like, we'll see." And then he goes home, and he does a ritual. He gets his little hands out. He like points them at the phone, and he clicks to hear the voicemail. And every time he hopes it's different, and every time it's no voicemails.
Yeah.
He moves his desk. He grabs the couch, like it's like a futon couch. It turns it into a bed. He grabs a little Dixie cup and puts some alcohol in there and kind of lays back and just drinks his sorrows away.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's like crazy relatable, but I felt that, you know, like life just it can be tough sometimes, and you know, you just kind of have to like make do. And even if you have a crappy little bed and no gigs, you know, you just got to work your way through that. But also how he goes above and beyond to look for the Kettlemans, and he goes above and beyond to like impress Kim Wexler, because clearly she also doesn't, you know, she's like, "Oh no, you're kind of dirty. You kind of cut corners. I don't like that."
Yeah.
The way he's trying to constantly, he's been shot down by Howard Hamlin to get a job.
Yeah.
Not once, but twice when he gets Sandpiper. And it feels like no good deed goes unpunished for him. He can't win because nobody will let him win. It's not that he's doing wrong. It's that it doesn't matter if he does right or wrong. They won't let him through the door to success.
Yeah.
And when he gets just fucking pissed at the end, and he just speeds away and he starts, I'm
Phenomenal.
like, oh.
Yeah.
And you can tell, even if they don't show you what happens, like, this is going to sound weird to say, but I almost didn't. The series almost could have ended there in a way because it sets up that you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know that like lack of respect, the lack of being able to take a fucking dub through all he's done, he's pissed at the world for like not giving him like what he believes is his fair dues, and now he's just going to take it.
Yeah.
So I really love that because even though it like obviously there's 5 more seasons, to me I already knew you already know what's gonna go down, and you could almost jump cut to just him being Saul
Why?
Goodman, and you could tell that he's just I'm done with this. I'm just gonna take what I feel like I deserve, and no one's gonna tell me otherwise. No
I
more morality is getting in the way.
I agree. Like, I think you could definitely end the series at season one. Obviously, we don't want to because the following 5 seasons are
Yeah, yeah.
incredible. But the fact that season one is so like tight, it's such a beautiful conclusion. I think season one, episode 10, Marco, is a phenomenal episode. I love that final scene, and just the little elements throughout as well, like how we get that backstory with Marco about how Jimmy, became a swindler, and how he's always kind of struggled for money, and how he's always had to cut corners, and the way he's had to get money, and how that's shaped his identity as a lawyer. So even when he makes it as a lawyer and is successful and is making money, he's still got those ways in him. He can't part himself from that. And I think too, like the symbolism of the ring that he gets from Marco as well, and just there's so many beautiful moments throughout
Same thing
season
with the
one.
quarter. Same thing with the quarter when he says it's facing east or west to represent a new dawn, and he's walking. I think he's walking right, and he stops at the edge of the screen and turns around, and he gets back in his car and talks to Mike. He basically abandons his morality at that point because he's seen that having this set of rules has gotten him nowhere.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I just love that because, even in our personal lives, I'm sure maybe our listeners can relate, but I'm sure that there's been times where you do things the right way, and then you feel like, there's a lot of criminals that just get away with stuff, or certain
Yeah.
people that are just rude and they get their way. And I'm not saying that's good or anything, but it's just like, whoa, that's not fair
Yeah.
that people follow the rules and they don't win, and
Exactly.
people skip that and get theirs. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And honestly, like, I loved the first 3 seasons in particular because I really enjoyed seeing Jimmy, like, struggle, like the different struggles that he has with being respected by his brother, and, not being respected by other people, and trying to become a lawyer, and how, like, his battle as well between doing the right thing and trying to suppress, like, those inner urges that he has, like whether or not he is a good character, and like the way he struggles for money, and the stuff with Kim as well. It's so well executed, and yeah, I think Jimmy's character is so complex and has so many like nuances. It's honestly incredible that they managed to flesh him out as well as they did, given
Yeah,
the standard set up in Breaking Bad.
yeah, and also, I want to talk more about Chuck and Kim Wexler as well, because when Chuck, is saying get your life together, I want you to like just not be this kind of icky person that I look down upon.
Yeah,
You kind of get that. I'm an older brother myself, so I remember when I was younger, and I would give advice to my brother, or he would do things that I would disapprove of. I kind of related to that in a way, right? At the end, when he just snaps and he gets really dirty on him, Bob Odenkirk's performance here is beautiful, by the way, because he's holding, you can tell he's holding back the tears from just sobbing,
yeah,
and Chuck just puts it all on the table. He basically, says, I hate you. I don't like who you are. You're not a real lawyer. I don't care what your degree says. Giving, what does he say? He says, slipping Jimmy I can handle, but slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like giving a monkey a machine gun.
yeah.
It's such a powerful line that, like, wow, fuck, dude. Tell me how you really feel, you cunt.
Yeah, for sure. I think this might
And,
be a hot take, but I think Jimmy and Chuck's relationship is potentially the best character relationship I've ever seen in television. Just purely based off what happens between them, it completely makes you understand like how Jimmy becomes Saul Goodman and what he transforms into, and we get it, you know. And honestly, like, you could end the series like you said with season 1. You could end it after season 3 with Chuck's death, and then we could just cut to, you know, Saul being Saul, right? And we would understand how he became that way. Obviously, seeing like the layers and having it unfold for us is a lot more entertaining, but like, we get it, right? Like, and it's so complex and nuanced. There's so many different layers. Like,
Yeah.
and one thing I especially love about this series is the way it uses flashbacks. I'm a huge fan of flashbacks, right? I think sometimes they can be overdone or they can be poorly executed or completely unnecessary. But I think Better Call Saul knows when to use them, and every single flashback in this series is perfect because it gives us just a key piece of information about our characters that kind of recontextualizes, you know, what's unfolding in within like the episode or the season, right? One great example for me, like one of the best scenes of the entire show, and barely anyone probably remembers it because there's so many like big moments and this is such a small one. It's a cold open where Chuck, Jimmy, and Chuck's wife, I forget his name. I
Oh,
think
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forget her name, but basically they invite Jimmy over for dinner. I think it's one of the best flashbacks I've ever seen because it just gives so much information and depth to the characters and the relationship in just one very simple scene where all that happens is they have dinner. We get to see like Chuck's perspective of how he views Jimmy, right? And how there's this underlying jealousy that actually drives him. You know, Jimmy is effortlessly charming and he has this sense of charisma that Chuck just simply doesn't have and can never match. And we see like the polar opposites between these two characters. We see Jimmy's good nature in, you know, having dinner with them, trying to help Chuck win back his wife, right? The setup and payoff as well, where Jimmy's cracking these jokes at the dinner table and he's just making her laugh over and over and over again. And then after the dinner party's over and Chuck's laying in bed with her, he cracks a joke and she doesn't get it and she doesn't laugh. And
Well, she also cracks jokes at Chuck's expense about
yeah,
lawyers.
yeah.
Like, oh man.
And I thought, like, what a brilliant scene that just completely recontextualizes the way we view Chuck, you know? Like, in one very simple scene where really, like, not much happens, it completely paints, like, the way Jimmy sees Chuck and the way Chuck sees Jimmy in a whole new light. And, like, that's just one example of a number of incredible flashbacks throughout the entire series, really, but I especially love all of the ones related to Jimmy and Chuck's character. Another great flashback is the one where Jimmy's working at his dad's shop and he sees his dad getting ripped off. You know, Jimmy is basically introduced to how the world is unfair, right? Like, his
Yes.
father is a very good person, but he's getting ripped off. The world doesn't care if you're a good person. And he's seeing his dad get ripped off time and time again. He's like, fuck it, I'm going to take advantage of that. And it's never like established like how much Jimmy was stealing. We do know that he was stealing from his father, but could have just been one time, or maybe it was, you know, a lot over the time. But Chuck knows about it, and Chuck's kind of inner disdain that he does bury a little bit for Jimmy. When it comes down to it, like, Chuck blames Jimmy for the father's death, but Jimmy
Yes.
and the way he deals with trauma, comes back into it later on, is he never even considers the fact that he might have been partly responsible for his father's death. Like, after his father's business goes bankrupt and he dies shortly after, Jimmy not once considers the repercussions that his own actions might have had on his father's well-being, right? He just suppresses it and doesn't consider it. Meanwhile, Chuck basically blames Jimmy for their father's death. And yeah, these flashbacks and the way we are given these little bits of information throughout the series and the way these little pieces of the puzzle fit the bigger picture, I think it's brilliant. I think it's probably the best execution of flashbacks I've seen in television, to be honest.
Yeah, and so just to hop on your points, real quick, Chuck's wife is Rebecca,
Yeah,
portrayed
Rebecca.
by Ann Cusack.
Yep.
And to touch on what you said earlier as well, the flashback in which the man steals money from the cash register, he says to Jimmy, to a little baby Jimmy, he tells him, "In this world, there are wolves and there are sheep. You
Yep.
know, your dad's a sheep. I'm sorry to tell
Yep.
you."
And that shapes
And
him for his entire life, that one comment, and how he
I
views the
think,
world.
yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. And you see how he gets his scheming ways. In a way, like, this is gonna get really philosophical, right? But is it even Jimmy's fault that he is Slippin' Jimmy, or is it like the world at large? Because you don't get to choose your family or where you're
Yeah,
born. You don't get to choose your circumstances.
exactly.
So your circumstances shape you into being a scammer, because otherwise you get to eat shit and die. Like, it's not right and it's not fair. But same thing with Chuck. Chuck saying you're Slipping Jimmy. You're not a, you're a fucking, you cut corners, you don't play by the rules, and I don't like you. But by him holding him down and not letting him work at HHM, he kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He makes him cut corners because then he tried to play it straight and he didn't
Yeah,
let him.
yeah.
And to touch on your flashback point, to be honest, I don't really like flashbacks. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. In my opinion, a lot of flashbacks kind of just add weight to what's about to happen in the same episode that it happens. Maybe this is because I'm an anime fan, and a lot of fucking animes do this thing where characters in a tough spot, they're about to die, and then they do a flashback that we've never seen or heard of before, where their, teacher, sensei, dad,
Yeah, yeah,
family member gives them like a secret power up that they never had, and then bam, they pull it out their ass,
yeah, yeah.
5 minutes later. That's why I don't really like flashbacks, but I agree that I think they're done pretty well. And when it's like that, yeah, I don't really mind it because it's not blatant. It's a long-term thing that when it happens years ago, you see how it affects them moving forward. And
Yep.
speaking of Chuck's jealousy for Jimmy, when fucking that scene where their mother passes
Oh,
away,
dude, I was just about to bring that up as well, and she mentions
Jimmy walks
Jimmy's
away to get
name.
a hoagie. He walks away to get a sandwich, which
Yeah.
fair enough, you're hungry and you can't be there all day. I get that. But when her last word is Jimmy and he just
Mm,
hears it, he sits there, Jimmy comes back and he doesn't fucking tell him
yeah.
what did she say anything? And he just says no.
What
Like,
a
what a,
yeah. What
oh
a brilliant
man.
scene, because that just puts everything into perspective for Chuck's character, right? Like, he's the good son, right? He's the one that's got the law degree, who's living life by the books, and is there by her side in her final moments, yet still everybody loves Jimmy. That seed of jealousy that it plants, it just puts everything into perspective when, all of the events later on where Chuck's always kind of like stomping on Jimmy and not letting him become, a lawyer, and all of that kind of dynamic between their relationship. We get it.
Do you think Chuck actually loves Jimmy? Because I do. I still think he loves him,
Yeah, they both
just
they both
in
love
a
each other for
twisted,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
just in
it's
a twisted way.
it's just a complex relationship, and that's life. And
Yeah.
some of the things these two characters say to each other, like, it is heartbreaking because it is a bit of a tragedy. Like, I really like what you said about, like, is Jimmy a victim of his circumstances? Like, is he only doing these swindling kind of things because he can never live up to making his brother proud, and he keeps trying to do these things thinking that it will help make his brother proud, but ultimately, like, he can never really make his brother proud because Chuck just has this preconception, and everything Jimmy tries to do to make him proud ultimately just proves Chuck's point, further. And it's just like a never ending cycle where Jimmy's ultimate goal is to make his brother proud. Like, his opinion of him means so much to him, but the things that he does to try and accomplish that ultimately just proves Chuck's point further and makes him, never be able to see him as anything more than swindling Jimmy.
That's one of the beautiful things about the show and what it does with its characters. And another character that we haven't touched on as much as I feel like we should have is Kim Wexler.
Yeah.
Because I love when she was first introduced, I was like, okay, so what the fuck are you? Like, who are you? I don't know
Well,
you.
season one,
And
she's not really a overly important character. Like, she's established as kind of just being like Jimmy's sounding board, someone that's kind of on his side and has his back a little bit, and there's a
yeah,
bit
but
of like a
sometimes they
romance.
kiss. He takes the
Yeah,
cigarette out of her mouth, but they're like, but she doesn't.
it's a
She
distant.
rejects his advantage.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a distant kind of like. I don't think they're dating in season one, or if they are, it's a
I don't think
very
they ever officially
they get
date.
married. but
Well, Well, even then, that wasn't really like an official marriage because it
Yeah.
was so they couldn't testify against each other. I mean, they still loved each. I think you can't deny that they loved each other for sure, but they never really put a title on their relationship because even when
Yeah.
they're having sex, they're still like working against each other in some like scenes. Or a lot of times when she doesn't like what he does, she kind of like doesn't give him affection. She holds that out on him until he becomes like a straight face, but then she gets corrupted by him.
Yeah.
It's such a yeah, very nuanced relationship. All the relationships are very fucking nuanced, just like real life. Would you
Mm.
look at that?
Like the way they set Kim up in season one is she's basically like the angel on Jimmy's shoulder, right? That tells him to do the good things. She's very much by the book. She's in a similar position to Jimmy, obviously a different background, but she also comes from like a non-wealthy kind of background, and she's had to work hard to get where she is, and she's getting her comeuppance at a similar time to Jimmy, although Jimmy definitely has like a lot more struggles and stuff. They're very similar characters, but they're also polar opposites, and she's kind of like Jimmy's moral guideline in season one. At least that's what she's established to be in season one, season two. If you told me like where Kim ends up as an individual character, and like it's not even a straight line for Kim, right? It's not like, oh, she starts off here and then she ends up here and it's just a straight line. There's so many zigzags for all the characters, but in particular with Kim's. To see the places that they take her character, I never could have predicted that at all. Look, I'll come out and say it. I think that Rhea Seehorn as Kim Wexler is the single best performance I have ever seen from an actress in television. Period.
Whoa.
Yeah, the best performance by a female actor I have ever seen in television. She is fucking incredible as Kim Wexler, and for me, one of the highlights of the show, because talking about Breaking Bad, like some of the criticisms that are leveled towards it is with the character of Skylar, right? Don't think Anna Gunn gives a bad performance by any means, but Skylar's character in general seems to be like a bit hated by the Breaking Bad fans, right? Because she kind of gets in the way of Walter and that kind of thing. But Kim had the potential of being, that Skylar character for Jimmy, right? Being someone that the fan base maybe gets annoyed at of getting in the way of Jimmy, or like we just want to see him do these fun kind of scams and stuff, and she gets in the way all the time and she's always nagging. And she definitely like there's times throughout the series where she seems to be this like perfection of morality character, right, where she can do no wrong. But I actually like that they have elements like that in there, because then when she actually does, her morals do get corrupted at certain points, it makes her far more interesting and complex. But Rhea Seehorn's, like, no one else could have played Kim like she played Kim. She is fucking incredible. And look, the same can be said for a lot of the other cast members. The acting in this series is phenomenal. Dare I say, maybe even better than Breaking Bad. Like, Breaking Bad is phenomenal, particularly with its like main characters, but in terms of like across the board performances through every single character, even the side characters, even the characters that only appear for like a few episodes or a few scenes, the acting in this show is some of the best I have ever seen in television.
No, yeah, 100%. I really was taken aback when some of the more serious scenes happened and you can see the water start to come out from their eyes, or the micro acting, like when their face just twitches a little bit,
Yeah.
like I'm a big fan of those kind of performances where you just see them staring into the camera and kind of like what's going on in their mind.
Yeah.
Their eyes will start to dart at their feet, or like their fingers will start twitching. You see how Saul slash Jimmy moves his hands a lot, and he practices it in his free time.
Yeah.
Rhea Seehorn's performance and her
Yeah.
character
Her character's
always
incredible.
left me confused
Yep.
sometimes as to what the fuck she even wanted. I got insane amounts of whiplash when she said, I'm tired of your shit, Jimmy. Like, we should get a divorce, not even get a divorce. We should either split up or get married. It's just like, what?
Yeah. And it makes
What?
sense as well. Like, it's crazy. I remember watching that. I'm like, what the fuck? Because that's the way they end the episode, with like her suggesting they should get married. And I'm like, what the fuck is, like, where did that come from? But then I sat back and I thought about it. I'm like, okay, no, from her perspective, it kind of makes sense. And going back to like those flashbacks I was saying, like the flashback that we get with Kim and her mother, it completely
Oh
makes us
yeah.
understand like her relationship with Jimmy, right? Like she grew up with a mother and she's sticks by Jimmy's side so much because of that relationship when she was younger as a child. And yeah, Kim's like female characters in television, it's getting better obviously, but traditionally they've always kind of just been like, oh, they're the love interest, and that's about as deep as their character depth goes, right? Kim's character is one of the most complex characters I've ever seen for like a female character, and that combined with Rhea Seehorn's incredible performance, she might just be like my favorite female character in television, and she makes the show. Like she had the potential to be a weak point of the show for me, and in season one, like I had kind of some slight concern. She wasn't bad in season one at all, but I thought like, okay, she's kind of like dull compared to the rest of the characters. Where she like we know she's not in Breaking Bad, so like what happens between her and Jimmy? Where do they take her character? Is she just gonna get killed off by like some mob boss? I was intrigued to see where they take her. I could have never expected them to take her the places that they did and execute it so incredibly well.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that Kim Wexler was here to stay and that she wasn't in Breaking Bad, I swear she was gonna get killed by
Me too.
some cartel member.
Yeah.
And I also really liked, shout out to like Vince Gilligan and Peter Gold, who their female characters, both like the Skylar and Kim Wexler's, you know, they don't take that background role. They kind of
No.
grab life by the horns, and they both can go up to the protagonist and say, "No, fuck you. I don't like the way you're doing this. I
Yeah.
don't agree with you." They're not afraid to stand in their way if they feel like their moral compass isn't in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I know people like might not like Skylar, but she's a fucking pregnant housewife for like half that show. You
Yeah.
know, like she's having an affair because her drug dealing husband is threatening to like never leave her and she can't rat him out. So like that's she's just playing her cards. I get why people dislike her, but to me that makes sense because you're not just gonna sit there and take it, you know, and I really respect that these characters don't just sit there and take it in the same way that Kim Wexler says, no, Jimmy, fuck you. I don't like this. I'm not with you and I'm going to go if, you know, if you don't kind of get it together and during those early seasons. She really wants him to be someone that I think deep down he's not. Even
Yeah.
if they both want him to be the straight good lawyer, he can't. But also the way that she kind of
Embraces that aspect of him.
yeah, but she also lies to herself
Mm.
because she starts doing a lot of pro bono work and what I believe to be her dealing with her guilt of like the things she does later on. I feel like she does a lot of, you know, things that are against her moral compass and she feels like she's making up for it by doing pro bono lawyer work.
Yeah,
That like
it's like it softens the blow of some of the other things she's doing, right?
yeah, I agree. And one of my favorite scenes that like really just, you know, shows the juxtaposition between Kim and Jimmy's relationship is when they're having a drink. So, you know, they both have their nice apartment
Mm-hmm.
and they're just staring out the
Out in the
balcony.
balcony? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she like he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna tip over the bottle, haha," you know. And she just says, "No, I'm gonna go ahead and do it." Like she doesn't, and this is shown in Carrot and Stick later on as well. She doesn't fucking play. She doesn't talk. She just does.
Yeah.
And she cracks those bottles just out in the parking lot, and he starts throwing bottles out in the parking lot too.
Yeah.
But like she's the one who kind of like pushed him to go over the edge, and then you know they go to sleep. They wake up in the morning. They go to work in their respective cars and they see the aftermath, the
And
broken
she
glass
cleans it
and
up.
bottles. And she cleans it up. Whereas Saul says he justifies it by saying somebody else would do it. That's what
Yeah.
we paid like the trash people for, right? It's
Yeah.
someone's job to clean it up. So he just goes and she painstakingly stays behind
Yeah.
to clean up her mess. So it's like, oh, so you'll go ahead and break the bottles, but then you won't go all the way and like
Yeah.
leave it there. You'll go and pick it up. I'm like, that's such an interesting thing that pays off later too near the final three seasons.
It's perfect.
I love that.
And going back to like with that whole mainstream argument about how like this isn't the most accessible show, like an average audience member would watch that scene and be bored because it's just, you know, them throwing bottles and then Kim cleaning it up. Like nothing's happening that's exciting here. But like for people like us, like that scene is incredible. You know, it's one of the most memorable moments of the entire series because it basically just shows that contrast between their two characters and the way they deal with like the repercussions of their own actions.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about that scene later in retrospect when we get to the other three seasons.
For sure, but like continuing down the path of performances, so we've touched on Rhea Seehorn. Look, Bob Odenkirk, he was brilliant in Breaking Bad, but my god, does he take this character of Jimmy McGill or Saul Goodman or even later like Gene? He takes this character to levels I never expected having seen Breaking Bad. You know, like the amount of depth that he gives this character. I don't think anyone else could play Saul Goodman the way that Bob Odenkirk plays him. He
Oh
is
no, for me,
incredible.
he is.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
he
is
makes the
so
show.
good.
Like whether it be like the Slip and Jimmy kind of aspects where he's, you know, very, he's got that bravado and that confidence, and he's talking to people and he's kind of like swindling them, and or whether it be those serious scenes that we get, right, where his life is in danger, or whether we get those moments of struggle. He's just such an engaging and relatable character, I think, for the audience, you know, especially in these first few seasons where a lot of the struggles that he actually goes through, they're very, very relatable struggles, aren't they? You know, like him trying to do the right thing and just having it backfire, or every time he thinks he's finally making it, you know, he gets shut down, and that struggle and the way he conveys that, I think, yeah, Bob Odenkirk's performance as Jimmy, it's an all-timer for me.
Yeah, even just when he does subtle things. I remember one of the most memorable in the episode Switch. I believe it's in season 2 when he gets the job with the Maine law office.
Yeah.
There's a switch that on the wall and it says, you know, don't push it. And he like he just goes up and he pushes it and
Yeah.
it does nothing. Nothing changes, nothing happens, no one talks to him.
Yeah.
And then he just flips it back. But it just shows you his character of like, I'm not gonna fucking follow everybody's rules.
Yeah.
And whether he can't help himself or because the rules are bullshit.
Exactly.
It doesn't really matter at this point because that's who he is. And I love that, again, I know we're talking a lot, but I love how everybody perceives him different.
Yeah.
They perceive him as James Morgan McGill, Slip and Jimmy, Charlie Hustle, you know, like Saul Goodman, Gene Tanko. He just has all these names because everyone has a different perception on him.
Yeah.
And I love that. The show is a bit on the nose with that, with like all the different names. But that just goes to show, like, we're not the same person to everyone we speak.
Exactly. And how complex he is as a character, and like the way he approaches certain things and how different that is to what we as an audience can expect, or like what a normal kind of character would do. Like, I think one of the things that makes his different heists and all the different like shenanigans he gets himself into, what makes it so incredibly engaging for me is the fact that like what he's actually doing is withheld from the audience. So as an audience member, we're watching it like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, we don't understand the actions that he's currently taking and how that like is contextualized into his end goal, especially with elements of like season 2 and season 3 in particular. And I love how, for example, like he's not happy with his job at the lawyer firm, right? So instead of quitting or finding, you know, some kind of like reasonable way to terminate his contract, he just starts coming to work in all of these different like attires, and that montage that we get is incredible, you know, where he basically sabotages himself to get fired so that he still gets like that payout. It's incredible. And just the way like Jimmy's brain works compared to different characters, it's so engaging and it's so original and fresh. Like, we haven't really seen Jimmy's character portrayed on like a television screen before, right? Like, he's wholly original in that sense, and it's really refreshing to watch that unfold.
Yeah, and the show does that a lot, especially with like, you know, 2 other examples that I can think of is when Kim says she has an idea for how to get Hugh Babineau out of like legal trouble.
Yep.
She just fucking walks off into a convenience store and starts putting markers and paper in her cart, and the episode, I think it ends right there. And it's like, what the fuck is going, I don't know. Like, they don't, you don't know until retrospect what the fuck they were thinking. You know, like characters will just walk off and do things and they won't say anything because, you know, they don't want to expose it to the camera or to another character. And it's you as the audience member, you just kind of have to like piece it together, or later on they'll explain it to someone else, and you're like, oh, okay. But I really like that what they're thinking isn't always shown. They just do it, and you either figure it out, or you can piece it together later. But that
Yeah.
information is not always immediately available to you right now.
Yeah. And that makes it so much more exciting and fun, like some movies and TV shows, they kind of they like to lay out the plan first and then have it be executed before our eyes. Whereas, not knowing what the characters are doing in that moment just makes it so much more engaging for me.
Yeah, and the second example I was going to say was Chuck, when he tells Jimmy, "You don't really matter that much to me," and the Jimmy just goes away, and then he fucking destroys. Chuck destroys his own house. He
Yeah.
starts just tearing down the walls and looking at the electricity meter, and then he just burns it down. And it's like, okay, I have no idea what was going through his head. I'm sure, there's a lot of things that were implied. It could be a lot of
Mm.
things, but it's never outright stated. It's kind of left for you as the audience to figure it out and put it together as
Yeah.
what he was saying.
We need to talk about Chuck, because Chuck for me is one of the best characters in the show, and the performance by Michael McKean, he is incredible. Like I've said, all of the acting in the show is incredible, but Michael McKean's performance as Chuck is insane. He nails that character. The fact that he wasn't nominated a single time for an Emmy, I believe, is insane to me, because his performance, particularly in season 3, is insane. So first of all, what a brilliant and creative illness that he has. And what is it, an allergicness to electricity?
Hyper electricity sensitivity.
Yeah, sensitivity to electricity. It's a real thing as well. But
I never heard of it before till this show, and I looked it up, and yeah, it's a real thing. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah, and I love the way that affects his character, right? Obviously we do later learn, throughout season 1, we see Jimmy take care of him, and we see it's the little brother looking after the bigger brother, but the bigger brother also helps out Jimmy with the law stuff, and we kind of get to hear a bit about too what Chuck was like before this illness. And it's probably obvious from the get-go that it is a mental health kind of thing, but it isn't really established until season 3 that is the case, and how it's basically Rebecca left him, and the way that he deals with his divorce was through having this mental illness develop. And I thought it was a really well executed way that how they handled Chuck's character. And yeah, it's such a creative way. It's a limitation for his character, because obviously he's kind of just stuck at home, and then when he eventually gets back into the office and stuff, and how they shut down the whole building for him, and the spacesuits as well. There's so many brilliant moments with his character.
I think it works really well too, because on two fronts, right? On a narrative front, he is forcing everyone around him to conform to him.
Mm-hmm.
He is a victim. He is
Yeah.
somebody that everyone has to go out of their way to make compromises for him, so that he can be comfortable and not inconvenience him.
Yeah.
And I think that also shows the power struggle, literally the power struggle of how he's obsessed with power, and he's allergic to power, literally, electricity.
Yeah.
And he gets everyone else. He has the power to make everybody else turn off their phones and do this for him.
Yeah.
Whenever he walks in the room, all lights go off, everyone's phones go away, because it's Chuck. We have to conform to him.
For sure. And Jimmy's reaction to his illness is fantastic as well. In season 1, Jimmy doesn't once question, whether or not this is just a mental thing. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter to Jimmy. He wants to look after his brother. So he gets him the newspapers that he wants. He stocks up his fridge, well, the esky, because he doesn't have a fridge, right? And he takes care of his brother, and he doesn't care whether or not it's real, because he just wants to look after his brother, because his brother's respect means so much to him. And seeing how all of that setup is then paid off later on, when we obviously I love that scene where the nurse tells Jimmy in season 1 he belongs in an institute or something, and Jimmy won't fucking even listen to it, right? And he won't acknowledge it, or won't even consider that at that point. But then later on, when Chuck and Jimmy are kind of turned against each other, we have Jimmy kind of have to pull that ace out of the bag with exposing him in that episode Chicanery with the mobile phone battery. So it's great how like that element of Chuck's character actually matters towards like the plot and also like the character relationships as well. It's not just a gimmick, it actually matters.
Yeah, and even going back to like chicanery, right? When he gets that evidence with the recording, he is willing to get a device, a recording device, the electricity with batteries and power it on and cause himself all this pain because for him the law is sacred.
Yeah.
To get his brother in trouble,
Yeah.
to take away his degree, but he won't leave his house for Jimmy.
Yeah.
So he'll go through all that, but he won't do it for Jimmy. So it just really like,
and
there's so much there.
And yeah, probably my favorite like arc of the entire show is the Jimmy versus Chuck face off. And that particular moment, I think it might be even to end season 2. I can't quite remember the specifics, but where the episode ends with Chuck going out of his house, going to that printer place, and then having that kind of like attack where he falls and hits his... I thought he fucking died. And Jimmy's watching on across the street, and Jimmy has that fucking moment where he's like, if I rush to help my brother, what, like, I'm fucked. I have no excuse, you know. I'm basically making myself look guilty. So if he stays back, he's being selfish but, you know, getting away with the crime that he had committed. But by rushing up, he's got to help his brother, and he makes that decision to do that. And then just the way that unfolds, like, I thought Chuck died, so it was such an incredible like climax to that episode. And then the repercussions of that, how we have that guy only lies for Saul, like for Jimmy, to Chuck as well, and how Chuck like just has this nagging persistence that he knows Jimmy's up to something, and everyone around him is telling him like, no, you're crazy, but actually, yeah, he's right all along about his brother.
Right the whole fucking time.
that is incredible for me, because Jimmy is the protagonist. We're on Jimmy's side. Yet we're getting like Chuck onto him, and he's the only one, and he's right. So like Chuck is set up as the villain, but the villain is right in this instance. And I really love too like that nagging feeling that he has that Jimmy is up to something, that he's done something, and how he's fucking on the money every single suspicion that he has. Like he gets it to a T, right?
Yeah,
and that's just
one after Magna Carta. You think the guy just falls like that? No, he set it up, and it's funny because then in chicanery, everyone looks at him like he's crazy. That's what gives Jimmy his law license back. That's how he wins it.
Yeah,
and the fucking insane thing is that everything he says in that rant is, as you said, 100% accurate to a fucking T. But it doesn't matter if he's right because he looks crazy while he's saying it. So his credibility just goes out the window.
And to like the way that contextualizes like him being so devout, like that Jimmy was up to something, just goes to show that Chuck knows Jimmy better than anyone else knows Jimmy. And the fact that he's right makes us think that, okay, like especially with what happens in the future seasons with Jimmy becoming Saul and how his morality slips further and further, ultimately like when looking back at the series, like Chuck, as flawed as he was as a human, and how he definitely could have done things differently towards Jimmy, he was right. And arguably, like, although they're very complex and grey characters, if you probably had to like recontextualize it, Chuck is probably the protagonist. You know, he's the good guy in this situation. Like, if you look at everything from Chuck's perspective, and then you actually see that Chuck's suspicions and the way he treated Jimmy his entire life, although it's unfair, he is proven right ultimately through what Jimmy becomes later on. And then we have that beautiful moral question, right, where it's like, would Jimmy have become what he became if Chuck just embraced him and accepted him and respected him earlier? But he doesn't do that because he always sees him as Slippin' Jimmy, and it just creates this never-ending cycle where like these two characters, they can't, they can't work things out. And yeah, that absolutely devastating conclusion to Chuck's end in the end of season 3, like probably my favorite final episode of a season. Like it and season 1 are incredible for me, but Chuck's death it's really fucked up, man, because we have that like final scene, that final moment, those final words where he tells his brother that he means nothing, like he never really cared much for him, and like we know that that broke Jimmy's heart, and he just walks away and doesn't really acknowledge it. But we also see that that love that Chuck actually has for Jimmy, even though he said that thing, deep down he loves his brother, and once that he says that thing and that relationship has been severed forever, and we know at that point like these two characters, they just can't work things out, that's when his mental health spirals out of control. That's when his electromagnetic thing gets worse. That's when he starts going insane and ripping out the walls, and he just completely loses his mind. And it's the same thing that happened after his divorce, but on a bigger scale, right? Like after his divorce, he couldn't cope with that, so he develops this illness. And now we see with Jimmy, like once that relationship has been severed, done and dusted for good, and he's lost everything at this point. Like Chuck, he's no longer a part of HHM. He's had to retire. He's got nothing left. And honestly, like, it's one of the most tragic ends to a character. And even though Chuck is like established as being this character that we as an audience member are kind of against, it's so incredibly heartbreaking to watch his final moments and the way that he ultimately meets his end.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that Jimmy reacts to that.
Oh.
Can we talk about the
Yeah.
later half
Yeah,
now?
let's head into seasons 4 to 6, because yeah, I'm with you. The way that everyone reacts to like Chuck's death, like it feels like we kind of transition from, you know, seasons 1 to 3 is its own thing. Now the show kind of takes a different direction. Jimmy's reaction to his brother dying, I never expected that.
Or lack thereof.
Exactly. Yeah, like he kind of just shrugs it off like it was nothing, like he doesn't acknowledge it, and then we kind of like, it makes sense, you know, because he did the same thing with his father. His father died because of, arguably because of like the actions that Jimmy took by stealing money and aiding in like that business going broke. Jimmy never acknowledged that. He never accepted any responsibility in that. And then the same thing happens with Chuck, and you know what he does? He blames Howard. He never once considers like, maybe I had something to do, because we all expect as an audience that, oh my god, like this is going to shock Jimmy to his core, like he's going to feel guilty and responsible for Chuck's death. No, he never even considers the fact that he was responsible, and he pins it all on Howard. And it makes sense to Jimmy's character that he does that, and it also just sets things up in motion for the whole Jimmy and Kim arc with their battle with Howard.
I think, I don't think it's that he doesn't consider it. I think he just buries it.
Yeah, he can't
Because
consider
he
it.
makes note of it later on, way the fuck later on, obviously. But at the beginning, I think it hurts him, but he's like, whatever. And look, I don't know if this makes me a terrible person or not, but during those first few episodes of season 4, when post, Chuck trying to take his law degree, basically trying to take everything he's worked for, and he gives him a letter, and he opens it up, and he's like, yeah, blah blah blah, I love you, okay, yeah, it's whatever, man. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
Because if somebody did you that wrong, if someone hurts you that much, if someone tried to like ruin your life,
Especially with those final words, you know.
yeah, and then they give you a letter post mortem,
Yeah.
and it just says, I always cared about you. It's hard for me
Fuck that.
specifically.
Yeah, I couldn't deal with that.
To not say no,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna listen. I'm not gonna take this
Yeah,
as seriously, because your actions speak louder than words.
for sure.
And the last, both actions and the words of Chuck were literally to fuck Jimmy over, like, and destroy basically his entire life.
Yeah.
So for Jimmy to say, yeah, you didn't care about me, or you showed me and told me you didn't care about me, why should I start now?
Yeah.
It's not fair to him. Also, just to keep going off that train, sorry, I'm rambling here, but when he goes to get his law license again, and they do an interview, and they say, and he doesn't talk about Chuck, so they tell him that he's being disingenuous. That pissed me off.
Yeah.
Because that's him being genuine.
Exactly.
Because he genuinely doesn't give a fuck anymore. That's how he feels. And then, during the second hearing, he fucking lies his ass off. He does the whole he literally he watches a lot of movies throughout the show, which I really like. He pulls a fucking movie stunt where he pulls out the letter and he starts reading it, and then he puts the letter away and he speaks from his heart, and he's like,
and they don't buy it either. I love that as well. That even though he lies, the panel can like still see through it.
Well, no, they fucking bought it because Kim and another member of the board start crying now that he's lying, and it goes all right back to season 1.
That moment with Kim is so great.
Yeah. Well. Oh, when he walks out of the courtroom and she's in tears, and he's like, "Did you see that fucking dumbass crying?"
Oh my god,
sucker! He fell for it, bro. I thought he was being genuine too.
Yeah.
So when he told that to Kim, it's like he was telling me that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you got emotional, dumbass, sucker. You fell for it. I felt like I got personally. But again, it goes right back to show when he is genuine, they don't fucking like it. They don't buy it. They think he's up to something, and when he lies to their fucking face, just like with the, everyone that he's worked with, it works. He gets what he wants. It goes right back to the Kettlemans and the, what stopped you? And he's like, oh, something about doing the right thing. And he's like, oh, fuck that. I know where that's got me before, and I'm not doing it anymore. So he made the same mistake almost, where he tried being genuine. He tried being true to himself and his emotions, and it didn't fucking work. Then he lies to them because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear what they believe is the truth, and the real truth is that he was just hiding it all along, herdy-der. And then he does it, everyone fucking eats it right up, and he's like, y'all are idiots. And that's also when he yells at not yells, but when he goes to the consulting board at HHM and somebody has a history, one of the interns who they want to hire, and she has a bad history, so they let her go and say, no, sorry, you're not, we won't give you the position. And he finds her in the parking lot, and this entire scene is him projecting, right? Like, he tells her, if you have any bad records, they won't let you in because they're assholes. You're not allowed to make one mistake. They hate you, but you will cut corners, and you will step above, and you will show those motherfuckers like what's what. That's just him projecting his life story like onto her.
The show definitely has like a very interesting take on like that theme of like, doing the right thing versus is it really worth it, and Jimmy's character as well about like how despite like you trying to do good, sometimes it doesn't always mean it works out and that kind of thing. But yeah, just the way the show explores like that theme, I just found that whole aspect of the show to be super engaging and interesting for me. And yeah, like the show definitely has like a lot to say about like the way we view things and how life can be unfair sometimes.
Yeah, and even Mike in season 1 when he's talking to that annoying glasses bald guy with the baseball cards. I don't even want to. Don't even remind me his name. I hate. I don't want to know. I'm glad I forgot, honestly. He says, you're a criminal. And he's like, oh, no, I don't want to be a bad guy. He's like, no one said anything about bad guy. You're a criminal. You took something that doesn't belong to you that makes you a criminal. Good or bad, hey, that's something else.
Yeah.
And I love that because, I agree with that,
For sure. And I think like season 4 onwards, the show just goes in a direction that I guess we expect. Like it's where, Jimmy is now Saul Goodman, right? Like I think he gets the official kind of like rebranding as a lawyer, and he starts heading down that path, even though it goes in a way like down a path that we expect, because we know what he becomes in Breaking Bad, right? So now we're just kind of like beginning that process of like, okay, this is how he becomes Saul Goodman. We've seen that, and now like, Saul Goodman at the beginning is still very different to the Saul Goodman we get in Breaking Bad. So what is that process going to look like? But we get introduced to like a lot of other elements. Like obviously Jimmy's arc starts to center around him and his relationship with Kim, and making that kind of like moral question about like, are these two characters perfect for each other, or are they terrible for each other? Do you have a personal opinion on that? Like, do you think these two characters are just a bad match, or do you think they're a good match that through maybe certain circumstances it became a bit volatile?
Well, like with a lot of things, it's fucking complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just her history with her mother, his history with his father and mom. I think that they could have been good for each other, but they really did bring out a lot of their worst aspects
For sure.
get multiplied. It's like, feeding a fire
Yeah.
with wood, I think when he started slipping, ironically, more into the criminal life and becoming friends with a cartel, just doing a lot of fucked up shit, like, defending somebody who killed someone and saying,
Yeah.
oh, he wants to go home to his family while he's in the courtroom with the deceased, person's family. He's aware how fucking insane this is and he wants to hide it from her, but she insists that he tell her since, they're legally married.
Yeah.
He says, I could be a friend of the cartel, like, fuck, like, I don't want to do this. You can tell he doesn't want to keep going down because now shit's getting scary. Now the life or death, on the edge type of risky situations are getting more fucking real
Yeah.
and prominent. And one thing that really fucking blew me was when she said, you could be a friend of the cartel or you could be a fucking rat, pussy boy. I'm like, whoa, whoa. Like, she didn't say all that, right? But she said,
Yeah.
or you can be a rat, which is literally just like, you made the decision for him by phrasing it like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course
Unexpected
he's
from her as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I didn't like that. I was like, "Oh no, Kim. Oh no, sweetie. What are you doing? You're supposed to be the angel on his shoulder."
But she's looking out for him though, because there's no great decision there. Jimmy's kind of in a bad predicament, but like ratting out a cartel member is not the way to go, for the sake of Jimmy's well-being.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like he could have gotten out if he really tried here.
I don't know, like I think that it's kind of important to note too, like with Jimmy's arc and his descent from like, being Jimmy with a heart of gold, but having this underlying, he has deep down a good heart, but there's also circumstances that make him slip in Jimmy and that kind of aspect of his character. But a lot of the things that actually make him begin that descent, down that path, kind of like Walter becoming Heisenberg and Jimmy becoming Saul and losing his morality, a lot of the things that actually happen are outside of his control, which is super interesting. Like, yes, he makes a ton of bad decisions. Like, the key one that probably leads to Chuck's death is like that whole health insurance thing, And if he didn't make that decision, then things wouldn't have panned out the way they did. And yes, he's very active in his own downfall, but also a lot of the times, like, things kind of happen out of his control. Like, he can't control that Chuck just can never see him the way he wants to be seen. And the stuff with the cartel and the situations he ends up with, like Lalo, for example, that was kind of out of his control as well. He was just doing the best he fucking could in that situation, right? And even the stuff with, like, Walter later on and how he becomes down that path. Yes, obviously he is to blame and he does things that push him down that path, but there are also instances where things outside of his control just happen and he has to deal with it the best way that he can, And I think that makes him a lot more relatable as a character, where we can kind of, even though we don't agree with, like, the things that the person he becomes, we understand how he got there.
Oh no, yeah, for sure. Like, every step of the way into his descent, you get to see how it goes down. You really feel for him because, like I said, he went from pulling out a couch futon with his desk all packed in the back of a fucking nail salon. That when he finally gets a break, you can't help but feel that, like, oh, finally a dub alongside with him. But is that dub really worth it if now you're working as a cartel lawyer? Like, it is interesting to note. And the same thing happens with Nacho, where he does it all for his dad, but his dad doesn't fucking want him to work with the cartel. But by the time he wants to pull out, it's too late. Your choices are, like Mike says, you make choices, and now, like, it doesn't matter if you regret them. You're on that road and you can't stop.
Yeah, I love Nacho's character. Like, for one of the, like, new characters that wasn't previously in the Breaking Bad universe. I guess technically he was, because he was mentioned in...
It was mentioned once.
Well, yeah, just a random line where they mention his name in Breaking Bad, which is super cool that they kind of, built a whole character around that. I love that. But Nacho's character is fantastic. And look, we've seen his character before a million times. We've seen it in, like, mafia films and stuff like that. He's not a new or fresh character, But I think the way like he's portrayed by Michael Mando and the delicate care that kind of went into him, I found his character arc super engaging. I thought it was fantastic. I love how he's established kind of as like a villain in the beginning, but then we see like the softer side with the relationship with his dad and how he's kind of just like a victim of the circumstances he's in, right? Like he doesn't want to end up like his dad where he's working super hard for nothing, and he's kind of been, you know, from a young age thrown down this life of crime, and then by the time, like you said, like he realizes he doesn't want to be in it anymore, it's kind of too late. And his relationship with Mike is fantastic. Like it's very much like a father-son kind of relationship that kind of foreshadows a bit with, you know, how hard Mike tries with Jesse in Breaking Bad, you know, seeing like this relationship with Nacho. And my god, does Nacho have some of the most memorable scenes of the entire show. One I want to talk about for sure is the pill scene where
Oh yeah.
he swaps out the heart pills of Hector Salamanca and
Yep.
replaces them with placebo sugar pills. That like that one scene is like probably the most I've ever sweated watching television. Like, my god, and Michael Mando's performance as well. Like when he successfully like throws, like I love the entire execution of this whole dynamic. Right, like we see him practice it over and
Yes.
over and over and over again because his fucking life depends on it. Right, and and to see him like get in that moment, and it's so incredibly tense, and when he throws it, like my heart fucking stopped waiting for that to fall into like the jacket pocket, and when it did and he takes that sigh of relief, it perfectly was synced up with my own sigh of relief. And honestly, like that's one of my favorite scenes of the entire show because it has huge repercussions, because it answers the question like, how did Hector
Yep.
end up in the wheelchair? You know, well, he had a stroke because of Nacho. And I think that's like such an incredible thing. Like as a prequel, one of the strengths you have as a prequel is you get to kind of do these things. You get to explain these little elements. Like we could just assume from Breaking Bad Hector had a stroke and that's why he's in a wheelchair, but to actually like see like, no, it was Nacho, and his whole motivations for this, you know, trying to protect his father, was responsible for it. And then Gus fucking saved his life. Mind blowing to me. Incredible stuff.
Oh yeah, no, and also some of his fucking scenes. Since we're on Nacho, I want to like stick with him for a bit. Some of the fucking scenes later on are filmed straight out of a fucking Far Cry movie or some shit. When he's up against the twins turn
Oh,
into
dude.
Terminators this time around.
Yeah, for sure.
But when he's up against the twins and he has the gun on one hand and he starts breaking, like he breaks the truck, he turns it around and they're kind of having like a standoff in the desert, and he starts screaming. He floors the pedal and he starts just gunning, like shooting everyone down. I was like, whoa, what the fuck am I watching? Is this Better Call Saul or is this some like Far Cry spinoff? You know?
Yeah,
His
definitely.
films are filmed completely differently than everything else near the end there, because that
Yeah.
runaway and Mike and Gus, like, or Mike more so than Gus, trying to like stick through with him because he believes in him, and he's like,
Yeah.
nah, nah, he wants out, let him fucking get out. And Gus, like, yeah, you know, wink, we'll help him
Yeah.
out.
He
You know,
just gets
nudge, nudge.
used by the people above him, and it makes him like, you know, a very tragic character because we get his motivations. We understand, like, yeah, he's not a good dude, but that he has a good heart deep down, right? That situation with Lalo where he's dropping him off at the border, and then Lalo fucking has this hunch that he wants to go check out the car, and now how Nacho is thrown into that situation where he's stuck with Lalo. His whole arc from that point onwards is fantastic. I fucking loved it. Right, we get that moment in Lalo's like hideout kind of place where Nacho is forced to open the gate for all of those armed men to come in and kill him, and then surprise, surprise, Lalo survives, and then the problems that has for Nacho and him desperately trying to get out of Mexico. I mean, that shit, even though it kind of takes like a different direction for what the rest of Better Call Saul is, right? Like it's a very kind of character driven show, not a ton of action, and we get thrown in with these like cartel kind of shootouts and stuff. I think even though I do prefer, you know, the more character driven stuff, it was exciting, it was exhilarating, and we really wanted Nacho to succeed in that moment, and to see him finally like actually get out, but then ultimately have to sacrifice himself for the sake of his father later on. And we get that final scene with Nacho, which might just be one of my favorite scenes in the entire show.
I agree with you. That entire episode was a splendid send off to Michael Mando and the character of Nacho.
Definitely.
Because I love that. You know, he got like a baptism in oil at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like he literally like, you know, cleansed away. He had a final phone call with his dad.
That,
it really you
that was
honestly I knew what
call.
was gonna happen before it happened. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But unfortunately I knew what was gonna happen before it happened.
Well,
like
Nacho's not in Breaking Bad, right? So his options were to either like disappear or die. So
he was the Jesse Pinkman that didn't get away. But also, what I really liked about Nacho was, I think, besides, you know, Jimmy, he's one of the few characters that really took the cards he was dealt. He took life by the horns and kind of like did the best he could with his circumstance and kind of owned his situation, which I really fucking respected personally.
Me too.
Because in the scene where we have Gus Fring, you know, Mike Ehrmantraut, the Salamanca twins, and Hector, and he's pointing a gun. Everyone else is in Breaking Bad, and I know everyone lives.
Yeah.
I was still tense, you know, I was still on the edge of my seat because in the moment I wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, herdy-dur, I know these guys are in Breaking Bad, so nobody can get hurt here. Because, you know, like with Salamanca, Hector specifically, they can still get hurt. With, you know, Gus, there was a time when, you know, he was afraid to die. He wasn't the top guy. So it's to see how he got there. And when he kind of owned up to everyone, he told all these lies. He saved his dad. And instead of like shooting whatever the cartel boss guy was that was on top of
I know who you mean. That he held at gunpoint.
Yeah, instead of taking anybody with him, he shot himself. So he went out on his own terms.
Yeah. And it's cathartic when it's so cathartic when he has that final fucking monologue, right? Like we get that foreshadowing with the bit of, I think it's glass or something that he holds in his hand, and he uses that to get the gun, right? And that moment where he both like covers for Gus, you know, and covers for them basically not being accountable for what happened with Lalo, but also like has this moment where he is so cathartic, where he just gets to vent himself one final time, and he fucking looks at Hector and says, when you're eating fucking pudding for the rest of your life in that nursing home, you think of me. And then like Michael Mando fucking kills it. His performance is so understated because he's probably overshadowed by like stronger characters and stronger performances throughout, right? And he's playing more of like a understated, a man of few words kind of character that generally those characters are overshadowed by, you know, the Jimmys and the Chucks and the Howards that are a bit more overt. But his performance as Nacho is incredible, and it shows in this final scene. Like, what an incredible send-off. I genuinely don't think they could have like wrapped up Nacho's character any better than they did.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of Nacho. I loved his character. I loved his send-off. Like I said, he got to make Hector his bitch one final time. He took out his anger on everyone. And he, you know, it's kind of like similar to Walter White's end in a way, where he kind of like, he couldn't fix his relationship with his family or anything.
Yeah.
But he made right what he could at the end.
He did the best he could with the hand he was dealt.
Not even as a character in fiction or as a person in real life, going out on your terms and doing the best you can is all you can really ask for in life sometimes. I'm really happy that at least, I'm not happy he died obviously, but you know, he got the whole episode and he wrapped up his story in a satisfying way, unlike another character that I really liked and loved, which is Howard Hamlin.
Yeah, well, look, let's hold off on Howard a little later because we need to talk about Lalo Salamanca, who is another villain character that's kind of shoehorned in the latter half of the show. And look, throwing in a kind of like antagonist this late into a series, it can be quite dangerous because if it doesn't work, like, it can definitely affect things. It's kind of similar to what they did in Breaking Bad with like the Nazis, right? The neo-Nazis. They were kind of like just thrown in late because they needed some kind of antagonistic force. And while they weren't bad, they weren't exactly like a super memorable, great enemy
Well,
faction.
also making Nazis like the villains is pretty easy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Lalo is introduced quite late into the series. We are introduced with him with a scene with Nacho, and I never really expected him to get as much screen time as he kind of ended up getting. And wow, like what a phenomenal character to just introduce and breathe life into the series. Like he is just like a breath of fresh air into a show that's already got all of these like established characters who are undergoing their arcs. He just gets thrown in there and creates fucking utter chaos for the show. And yeah, what an incredible performance by Tony Dalton. Getting to see his relationship with Hector and how loyal he is to his family, and then when his compound is like shot up and he barely escapes with his own life, and seeing that desire for revenge, the scenes that he has with like forcing Jimmy to defend him, and the charisma that he has, the confidence that he has, the hunch that he wasn't willing to let go when Nacho's dropping him off the border, and he knew something was suspicious about, you know, Jimmy and the money situation. So I fucking loved his character. What did you think about Lalo Salamanca?
So unfortunately, I wasn't that big of a fan of Lalo.
Okay.
I think his performance is great, but I think his character just I didn't gravitate towards him a whole lot because I was a lot more preoccupied with the happenings of Jimmy.
Yeah.
And I really liked what it did though, because I understand that like with Breaking Bad having Tuco, and then we switch to like Gus, and then we switch to the Nazis. Having an overarching villain to stand against our protagonist in a way that like Chuck or Kim or Skyler do, like that's a lot more subdued. Whereas having like a big bad character that's actively out to harm and hurt our characters, I think he did great in stringing along Jimmy with his plan and dragging him into that cartel world,
Yeah.
as well as giving even Gus a run for his money. Someone we've seen keep it cool, calm, and collected the entire fucking show
Yeah.
is scared. He's scared of Lalo, which I think is something that we never really saw from Gus previously.
True.
And so I really like that he brings that. Also, he's kind of like a more subdued kind of Tuco, where he'll kind of like talk you up a sweet storm, and he'll be like, "Hey, partner, we're working together." But behind that like smile and those dead eyes of his, he's just a fucking psycho killer, isn't he?
Yeah,
But
I find
he
him
is true to his family. Yeah.
yeah, I
He
find
has
him
love. He has
believable.
emotion.
Exactly. Like we know his motivations. He's purely about family and loyalty. And I really like how believable he is as like an antagonist because like you said, Gus was scared of him and we haven't really seen that before, and it's believable, and again like the way he's involved in the plot with getting Jimmy involved down this kind of like criminal route again, and the implications that has for his character and other characters later on, and also the way he kind of ties into like the bunker being developed, like the meth lab being cooked,
Oh yeah.
and the way that his storyline kind of interweaves with that whole arc as well. I think he was just a really well executed character for what the show needed. I will agree with you, like a lot of people rate Lalo as like the best character of the series. I wouldn't go that far. Like he doesn't have a ton of depth, but I think he's just what the show needed because he helps bring the two storylines together, if that makes sense. Like he brings the world of Jimmy and the lawyer stuff. He brings that together with like the Gus and the Mike criminal empire stuff. And man, like some of the scenes that he has throughout the entire series, they are incredibly tense. Like especially that one where he barges in on Jimmy and Kim.
Yeah, I definitely found him to be a good villain, but not one that I think is the best.
Okay.
Like he never struck the same chord that like Gustavo did, because he survived the shooting, and that was really. And then we have that sick shot of him walking out for revenge, and he's just fucking ruthless, isn't he? Grabbing the other guy with he has similar teeth as him, so
Yeah.
he can leave the prince behind, and he just kills him and his wife in
Yeah.
cold blood. Like
Yeah.
that's so fucked up.
It's-
Yeah, when he leaves the compound and it's on fire, and like the thunder is heard in the
and he just
distance, and it
walks.
cuts to black.
Yeah.
That was fucking badass. I can't
Yeah.
deny that. But then he goes and hides in a sewer for like 2 episodes, you know?
Well, I like that though, because I like that they kind of set up like how badass he is, like how he manages to survive that shootout, and you know, we get the seed planted of like he's fucking hell bent for revenge. But he doesn't just like rock up and try and kill Gus the next episode, right? It's slow, it's methodical. He hides in a fucking sewer. He takes his time, he plans, he goes to fucking Germany to find the wife of that engineer. And
Ziegler.
yeah, like the way he goes about it just made him a lot more engaging for me, because it's not like he's very methodical in his approach, and yeah, I really appreciated that. One thing I do want to touch on real quickly though is, what did you think of the whole meth lab story arc with the with, like you said, is Herner Ziegler, is it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like obviously dynamic with Mike, and Mike working for Gus like as like a head man for the first time, and them building something that's very important to the Breaking Bad universe. Obviously, it's the lab where Jesse and Walt cook from. What did you think about that? Because I have heard some people complain about this arc as being maybe a bit too long and a bit too slow.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not really in touch. Like, I don't have my vein to the pulse of the fan base, but I actually really like that, because
Yeah. It's big for Mike's character.
It's a big fucking plot point in Breaking Bad that they have this meth lab, you know?
Yeah. How did it get there? Yeah. It answers a question.
It does. And, you know, having Werner Ziegler and his mates all come around and, you know, work on it in secrecy, and how that's tied up with the cartel, and Gus having to keep that secret, not only from the authorities, but also from the cartel that he's supposed to be working for, because he clearly has his own plan that he doesn't want people to find out. And one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, this is why I'm so glad we talked about this. I would put this scene, honestly, I think it's like top 3. I want to say 3rd favorite scene in the entire show.
Mm-hmm. I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's when the construction workers are walking in to the tunnel, and they're playing the Big Rock Candy Mountain song while they're going to work.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that. That's such a new thing, though. To pick out some tiny little moment of like symbolism and stuff. If I continue.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
I have.
The Coen Brothers film with George Clooney.
Yeah.
The movie starts off with that song as well, while they're, you know, digging rocks and running away at the beginning of that film. But to me, the Big Rock Candy Mountain, right? It's like, if you know the song, it's like a hobo's paradise, you know, soda, water fountains, all the cops all have wooden legs, jails are made of tin, you can walk right out again as soon as you are in. I love that song because it's depicting a world where we don't have to work. You know, it's a hobo's idea of paradise. It's heaven, you know, no money, just free time. You know, like with that film and here, just watching these fucking guys miserably hop into like a lavanderia, what's it called? A clothes washing van for the laundromat, and sneak in under the tunnel and dig it out and just get all grimy and dirty. And like with that song playing as the background, while the cinematography, like there's some sick top down shots of them just like single file lines walking in down, like, you know, just going to work. I love that moment a lot. It's really spoke to me, and I really just something about it. It's peak, you know, cinema. It's very symbolic. It made me really like enjoy. I enjoy that a lot, as well as I think there was a callback. I don't know if that's a callback to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, but there's another one that's definitely a callback to Citizen Kane, where they show them taking out the stuff out of Saul Goodman's former home. And on the road, they leave behind a tequila bottle top from when they did the first scam with Kim Wexler, where they scammed the guy into buying them a free meal and the free expensive-ass wine bottle or liquor bottle, whatever, tequila. Yeah, it's the same thing with like the Rosebud sled. I don't know if those... I know one of them is, but I love those callbacks and those moments of symbolism and how they played into,
and there's
like,
a ton of them, too, if you're like paying attention.
Oh yeah, but that one specifically with the laundromat, you know, with the construction workers and the Candy Mountain song, that one is one of my favorite moments there. I really love that one.
Yeah. I thought you were going to talk about the finale of season 4, where Mike ultimately has to make that decision to kill Werner. I think,
That was such tragic end to her. I definitely
yeah.
don't think he deserved it.
Well, look, he didn't, but like, you have that
I get it.
moment. Yeah,
I
you
get
you
it.
have that moment where like he's walking a fine line. They have that moment in the bar where Werner slips up when he's drunk, right, and starts talking a bit about the plan, and Mike's like, you can't be doing that shit, right? And Werner, he understands, but he ultimately like he's feeling trapped. He's not dealing with the situation, and he's the leader of all these men as well, and it's a very very delicate situation, and like we get it, right? Like he wants to talk to his wife longer. Like he just wants to see his wife. He is loyal. We do kind of trust him in a sense that he's not going to fuck things up for Gus, but that doesn't really matter, does it? And then when he ultimately escapes and forces Mike's hand, I think this is a huge moment for Mike because
Oh yeah.
to this point, like Mike is still kind of teetering, right? Like yes, he's not a good guy, but he still tries and actively tries to do the right thing in every situation that he gets. And then ultimately, like Werner, he ignores Mike's pleas and he escapes, and then Mike has to track him down. And then when he does, and Werner in that like scene with the such a beautiful shot scene, like you have the
Oh
beautiful
yeah.
city in the background, the bokeh of the lights in the background when they're standing out in the desert, and Werner basically he accepts his fate and says he's just gonna go for a walk, and Mike has to gun him down. That's one of the most heartbreaking moments of the entire show because Werner is one of the few, even though he's like cooking a meth lab for a drug cartel
Yeah.
member, he's one of the few like genuine good-hearted people in the show, and we can see like it hurt a lot for Mike to do that, and then like the repercussions of that for his character throughout season 5, and then him ultimately becoming who he becomes in season 6 and Breaking Bad. Like this is a big moment towards that. That's acts as like a catalyst for him.
Yeah, I think this could have been prevented if Werner took the fucking warnings as seriously as he should have.
Yeah,
Because I don't think it was ever outright stated, if you leave, we will kill you. Like, because
yeah,
they say lines like, for the amount of money we're paying you, do you know what this means? And he's like, yes. Okay.
yeah,
But I don't think, yeah. And so for him to just leave and he's like having like a drink and they find him and he's accidentally slipped some of the plan to fucking
yeah.
Lalo. I love that shot at the end with the night sky though. It
Oh,
is a beautifully shot scene with their
for
silhouettes,
sure.
and is that a callback to Ozymandias? Or it kind of reminds me of Ozymandias anyway, where Walter had to yell at Skylar, where Werner yells at his wife to go back home so that they don't
Yeah,
discover
fuck.
that anything's alright.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's a tense phone call.
oh, fuck
Because
me,
that's
dude.
because
Like,
that's his final phone call with his wife. Like
yeah.
it's super heartbreaking. I love too. Like one thing that Better Call Saul does super well is they have these like incredibly well told stories, right? But they're not just for the sake of it. They all matter. And this scene in particular, like not only is it huge for Mike's character, and also kind of ties back into like the whole meth lab being built, but it's also how Lalo ultimately tracks down the meth lab is because of this whole situation with his wife and stuff. It's an incredible episode, and just to I want to touch on the talking of the flashback that we get with Chuck and Jimmy. I'm not sure if you remember, but it's the karaoke night.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah,
winner
yeah.
takes it all.
Winner. Yep.
Wow, what a phenomenal scene! That knowing, watching that scene, because Chuck kind of like disappears a little bit from the show, but then watching that scene after his tragic end at the end of season 3, that was a hard to watch scene, but it was beautiful. And again, like just another example of how well the flashbacks are executed in this show.
Yeah, and like you said, it shows little character moments, like how Jimmy tells Chuck to sing and Chuck doesn't want to sing.
Yeah,
But then when Chuck starts singing, he fucking, practically pushes Jimmy off the stage and takes up the whole stage for
yeah,
himself. But then they still have that moment when they both go to bed, kind of a little drunk slash hungover. And they sing together in bed because, there's still an underlying love for each other. And I
exactly.
think I really love that because, even though maybe Jimmy doesn't believe it at this time or he's not ready,
Yeah,
the relationship, as you said, is just fucked but also complex.
Exactly. I think this scene kind of answers the question too about like, at the end, did they still love each other? And I think this scene is like, considering it happens, after the fact, it's just the reminder to say like, yeah, they did still love each other, even though they had that falling out.
Right. So now that we've talked about a few other, sympathetic and tragic characters, can we get on to the
the big
tragic one. And sympathetic?
If you told me in season 1 that Howard Hamlin would be like one of the most important characters in the final season of Better Call Saul, like, I don't even know like how many hoops I would have had to jump through to try and even like contextualize that in my brain, right? The way they handle Howard's character is incredible, and yeah, it's honestly like, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect Howard to take the role that he did. I did not expect Jimmy and Kim to basically go all out against Howard the way that they did. And somehow, in between all the messiness, it all makes sense, right? Like, Howard is a character who's set up to be a villain, but then we later learn, no, it was Chuck all along, and Howard actually wasn't really a bad guy, and he kind of always felt a bit sorry for Jimmy. And then we see after Chuck's death how fucking Jimmy just blames him. Yeah, Howard makes some like bad decisions, undoubtedly. Like, Kim calls him out on it as well, like after Chuck's death. And then we see like the way he tries to deal with his guilt. He becomes an insomniac. He can't sleep. He's really fucked up. That scene in the bathroom with Jimmy where Kim tells Jimmy to go to therapy, and then he just palms off the card or the contact number of the shrink to Howard. That's a incredible scene. And then we see like Howard's struggle, and then how he kind of like starts overcoming that guilt, and then how he tries to make amends by offering Jimmy sincerely like a job at HHM, and that's what Jimmy always fucking wanted, but he doesn't want that anymore because
it's too late.
It's too late. Yeah, Chuck's not there, and his whole motivation was to make Chuck proud, but that's gone. It like you said, it's too late. That scene where Jimmy fucking goes gobbler mode on Howard.
No, dude. I think that's definitely like top 2 favorite scenes.
Sure.
I think it might be my number 1 actually.
Bob Odenkirk fucking kills it, dude. And like even Howard playing second fiddle to that, letting Jimmy go off, the way like he walks and so upright, so in character, of like the perfect suits, the upright posture. It's fucking
He's not
brilliant.
giving him an inch.
Exactly.
He's not giving in.
And Jimmy...
He literally says, I'm sorry. I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
And Jimmy's like not having it.
Oh my god. And Jimmy, how like even after Hamlin's left, he keeps going. He takes it too far. And then that little moment where like he wipes his mouth at the end. Oh my god. What an incredible scene. One of the most memorable for sure.
Okay, I want to talk about the scene because I think it's my favorite scene in the series.
Yeah.
Because it's perfectly encapsulates Saul Goodman at this moment in time.
It shows what he's become, because this wouldn't have happened in season 1.
And this is also part of it shows his Chuck side too, because he was ranting just like Chuck did in Chicanery, calling bullshit on everything, right? And he lets some of that off. He goes up to him and says, you throw bowling balls at my car. Like, at this point in time, Howard is legitimately trying his little heart out to be the best version of himself he can be.
Yeah. He's
going to therapy. He's trying to... We didn't even know he was having relationship problems with his wife because he's not on screen all the time. And he even tells, Kim Wexler and Jimmy, he tells them, yeah, I have problems with my wife. You didn't fucking know that one, did you?
Yeah.
He's having so much personal, trials and tribulations, these problems. And he offers Jimmy a job in good faith with goodwill. Yep. No bad intentions, no hiding anymore.
Yep.
And he gets bowling balls thrown at his car. He gets hookers at his lunch meetings. And he goes up to... And he doesn't retaliate.
He gets basically his reputation ruined by saying that he's a cocaine addict.
And he doesn't retaliate.
No.
Well, except that one time. But even then, he does it fair and square.
Exactly. And I think it's really important too, is to establish like what Kim and Jimmy are doing to Howard. We've seen, at least Jimmy, not necessarily him and Kim together, but we've seen Jimmy do this dozens of times in the show before, right? Maybe not quite on this like level and not this personal, and maybe didn't take it this far, but it's just a natural progression of all the things he as Slipping Jimmy has done, both in his past life before the events of the show, right? When we get the Marco stuff and all of that, and then we see throughout the show the different schemes. It's like we said, like he doesn't often think through the repercussions of his actions, and it's a natural progression. Like all of the schemes, all of the different heists and things that he's done throughout the entire series, they all build up to this moment where he decides to basically prank fucking Howard, right? For no reason, you know? Like, yeah, okay, Jimmy blames Howard for Chuck's death, but deep down, he's doing it for the fucking fun of it. And it's actually Kim who's pushing him. Kim is arguably the lead in this situation,
Yeah.
which is a completely different, you know, way to take her character, but it makes sense, you know? And, like, she's always cleaning up the mess of the others, but of the people in her life, but ultimately, like, she gets off on this shit too.
Yeah, as you said, they literally get off on it because they were having sex while they heard the phone call of him getting in a fight over the legal disputes and like his reputation being ruined.
Yeah.
And he knows what's going on, and he knows that it's Jimmy. And I love that in that moment, even on his license plates, it says namaste, you know, like I come in peace. He means no harm. He offers them a job, and without retaliating, without calling the police for his car getting wrecked, he says, I am sorry that you are in pain, Jimmy. Like, I am here for you.
Yeah.
And I love the little detail when Jimmy's like, it amused me. Do you know why I didn't take it? Because it's too small. And he like jumps up and he does like a finger. Like if he just dunked on him and Howard's like, I'm sorry you're in pain. And he just...
He's the bigger man in that situation.
Oh my God, he's the best man. He's the bigger man. And it's funny because the entire time Jimmy's yelling at him that he's a small man in a teensy-weensy little boat. You have no idea what I'm capable of.
Yeah,
and
that
the tracking shot of Hamlin just walking away. Hamlin is literally the bigger man. Jimmy's in the background throwing his little rants. And the more he keeps bitching about how he's a god and lightning bolts showed out of his fucking fingertips like he's Palpatine or some shit, the smaller Jimmy looks. Until eventually he too he realizes that everyone's looking at him like he's crazy, just like Chuck had. And then he fades away into the background. Because if you don't give him the power of like listening to his rant and like his perception, he really is just a small, you know, I love it. Because you can tell that he's like a pufferfish. He's inflating himself to try to scare people and no one's buying it.
I think too, like I was saying, how we've seen so many different you know, heists or like scams that Jimmy has partaken in. We've always been on his side and we've always kind of entertained it, and most of the time it's kind of been harmless, you know, like most of the time it's for Jimmy to get his way and we're cheering him on. And even when he's doing these things to Howard, although like there's probably like most of the audience does deep down feel bad for Howard, we're still kind of like entertaining this, you know, we're finding it kind of funny, like the bowling ball stuff. And then
oh no, the second he threw those bowling balls, I was like, Jimmy, stop. Then when he did the hookers and the cocaine, I was like, I was getting annoyed. I was getting really annoyed at Jimmy because I liked when he pranked him, like at the beginning, because when he
starts taking
killed my brother. Yeah, when he says you killed my brother, I'm like, okay, like come on, you know that's not true. And the more we see Howard trying to plead with him, and the more he keeps pushing to just destroy Howard's life. I already, honestly, from season 1, I liked Howard's character because he called him Charlie Hustle, and he said, I know you're not a bad lawyer. I always saw that good side of you. You always...
He respected the work ethic, you know?
Yeah, he tried. And so for him to just bite back in such a nasty, hateful way never sat right with me. But
it makes sense because you have to remember Jimmy is compressing the trauma of Chuck's death by blaming Howard, right? And so even him doing these absolutely despicable things, it makes sense to his character. And another element I really, really love too is how it recontextualizes the way Howard views Chuck. Because all along Chuck was saying these things about Jimmy. He's saying that, you know, you got to be careful with Jimmy, and he wants him to go down a good path. And Howard kind of later saw that, like, maybe Chuck was being too harsh on him, and then, you know, empathized and felt sorry for Jimmy. But then all of a sudden, when these things happen to him, and we get that moment where he's publicly shamed with, like, the photograph switch out, and everyone looks at Howard like he's crazy. In that moment, we know that he understands how Chuck felt, you know, in that chicanery episode, because it's happening to him now. And wow, like, what an incredible way to kind of, like, just execute that whole dynamic and bring this back into the show in a way that feels so organic and is so big for all of their characters.
I also think it's beautiful when another intern, right, has those soda bottles and he's stocking the fridge and he kind of like spills them. He drops them on the floor.
Yeah.
And Howard goes up to him and the camera movement and like also the body language of the intern almost makes it feel like he's going to get reprimanded. You know, when Howard's just like, no, look, Chuck taught me you spin the bottle and like no more pop.
Yeah.
And you know, he wasn't, oh, you're fucking useless. He was just like, oh, you know, let's be more careful next time. But also, here's a neat trick. And I love that he's like, oh, you know, Chuck taught me that. And I don't know if it's implied, but maybe Jimmy shook the soda bottles and maybe Chuck had to learn a way around that.
Potentially.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Potentially. But also, they look at that painting or picture, whatever, of Chuck on the wall.
Mm.
And he said, one of the greatest minds I ever met. Yeah. And the intern says, I want to be remembered like that. And Howard's like, maybe there was more important things in life.
Yeah.
And because, yeah, like you said, he recontextualizes it because at the beginning he was buying like fucking $3,000, you know, tequila bottles to celebrate Jimmy's downfall. But now that everything is kind of like more clear and he sees like the McGill brothers, both sides, he's kind of like, maybe, you know, maybe there are more important things in life than just your dedication to one thing, you know, like, especially because he's going through his therapy phase where he's trying to better himself as a person as well in his relationship with others.
Yeah.
And I also think it's absolutely beautiful too. You were speaking earlier about how Jimmy and Kim are fucking him over and they're not grabbing the fucking consequences of their actions. They don't understand that the repercussions are far more than some fucking harmless prank. They're putting all these sticky notes on the back of a painting that they have in their apartment outlining the plan on how they're going to fuck over his entire life and how they're going to blame him for cocaine and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then they put that painting on the back where it belongs on the wall in the apartment. He has a fight with Jimmy, which I love this too. Before, you know, his farewell, he tells Jimmy, you want to duke it out? Let's fucking duke it out. And they go to that boxing ring with the referee, everything's fair and square. Yeah. I was so happy. I wish you could see the big greeny toothy smile on my face when he uppercuts the shit out of Jimmy.
Yeah.
And he just kind of stays down. For once, like, you know, he's the protagonist.
Yeah.
But I truly felt like he deserved that one. He really fucking
for sure. For sure. It was a great moment. But let's talk about that final scene because again, like, there's so many incredible scenes in this show, but this is definitely one of the most memorable for sure. It's the big moment where the two worlds collide. We have the Lalo Salamanca crime mob boss kind of storyline interweave with the Slip and Jimmy, the schemes, the lawyer stuff. They all come together. And look, Howard's final moments, incredible. The performance by Patrick Fabian, who I absolutely love. Like, he is a great personality, both as just a person, you know, as an actor, and then as a character as Howard Hamlin. He is phenomenal in this final scene. Like, he basically, he's had enough. You know, he's at his wit's end, and he rocks up at Kim and Jimmy's apartment and just says what he fucking needs to say. But it's unfortunately cut short by one of the most shocking moments in the show, for sure.
And before we get to that moment, I want to talk about that monologue that he gives at the end.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Because he puts it all on the table, and what I love the most is that he admits, or he really has shown that he sees all the angles here. At this moment, I truly believe like his third eye is open. Like, he truly sees every side because he's like, why are you mad at me? Yeah. Are you mad at me for sending Kim to the file dungeons? You know, fair enough. Are you mad at me because I was with Chuck and like playing like the game that he told me to play and perceiving as like not letting you join
Yeah.
because he told me to. Okay, are you mad because I like my father, Clifford Hamlin, basically, I was born in a good family and I got this job, but like obviously he had to work for it, but I'm sure it definitely wasn't the same struggle Jimmy or Kim
Exactly.
had growing up.
It's different. Yeah.
But he shows an understanding here.
He's fucking thought it through. He needs to fucking know why.
And then he says, I'm having trouble with my wife. I'm having trouble at work. My reputation's gone. But you know what? Give me enough time and I will bounce back. Even if the light wasn't immediately there, he saw a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
He knew, like, he had this optimistic, just beautiful view of life that fucking hell, I'm jealous of his view of life. And the confidence with which he didn't go there, he didn't punch anybody, he didn't scream at anyone. The most he did was grab a drink and say, okay, like, let's settle this, man. I'm tired of this shit. Unfortunately, the light at the end of the tunnel was a train. And after he's done with his rants, Lalo Salamanca walks in and
silence pistol
just puts the silencer on his gun all calmly. And you can see Howard panic a bit, like, okay, it seems I'm here at the wrong time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna head on now. Like, and he just dies.
And
he
the
just
reaction,
gets hit in the head.
The reaction from Kim and Jimmy as well. Like, this is the moment where like they realize they've taken it too far, and
in an instant, his life, everything he had going for him, all the woes and troubles, but also all the hope, just gone. Like that candle, I hated it when I saw it. Not in a bad way, but like, I couldn't fucking believe that's it. That's just how his story ends.
And what's worse too is that's not how his story ends. Ultimately, but he gets framed as a suicide, as being like a fucking drug addict. Like, it's kind of like Chuck, like the same things that Chuck was warning about Jimmy, they end up happening to Howard, and it kind of proves Chuck was right all along. And the fact that we see Lalo Salamanca and Howard fucking Hamlin in the same room together is mind-blowing to me. It's like these two worlds collide, and the repercussions of that, like, are huge for the show, and it's a heartbreaking end for Howard's character, because I absolutely loved his character. Every scene he was in, I was entertained. It was fantastic, and we finally see, like, the repercussions of Kim and Jimmy's actions.
They didn't think this through, and also the blood from where he got shot splatters all over the painting where they were planning his downfall.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you never, like, it's almost like the show, the universe, like, yelling at them, like, you idiots didn't think that when you were playing these pranks on this guy that it would lead to his death.
Yeah.
I never ever thought he would die, if I'm honest with you. I 100% thought Kim might die, like coin flip, I don't know. But
I thought Lalo would kill Kim. That was my theory.
But Howard, I think, honestly, his death breaks my heart and hurts me way more than honestly either of Jesse's girlfriends in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty fair.
Because
it's definitely well executed as well. Like, the way
Jane's death was great, but what was the name of his second girlfriend with Brock?
I forget her name, but yeah,
I think we forgot it.
We forgot it too. But in season 5, yeah. But Howard's is definitely rough, because Howard's a character we got so much time with, and he, of all the fucking people, like, he really did not deserve it.
Yeah, out of all the people, it was Andrea, by the way, But out of all the people in Better Call Saul that didn't deserve it, he didn't deserve it the most.
That's true.
Like, when Andrea died, right? It's obviously tragic. She didn't deserve it either, and she was innocent. But it was also, I always found it a little weird that it's like, hey, I'm a friend of Jesse's. He's outside. Come over here. And she's like, oh, let me go. And she's like looking at the car, like, I don't know. And to me, it just felt unnecessary. It didn't even feel warranted. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's a shit take. I don't know. But it's just my opinion, man.
Fair enough.
But Howard's death rocked me to my core. I was upset. I wanted to I wanted to punch the wall. Like, I felt like I was teary-eyed. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to grab the writers and why would you do this?
I think it's too, like, the first big moment too where we start second guessing, like, are we actually supporting the good guys here in Jimmy and Kim?
Oh no, that entire arc I knew they were wrong, but
Of course, but this is like
but I didn't fucking
the
think it
climax
would
of
lead
it.
to this.
Yeah. Well, let's move on and let's talk about the finale of the series. Let's talk about the final few episodes, because Better Call Saul has one of the most interesting kind of ends to a show, like, ever, right? It's weird because it's a prequel, and we obviously get a lot of those moments where things are falling apart for Jimmy and Saul, and the relationship with Kim becomes rocky, and he starts losing everything, and we're starting to see like that timeline marry up very closely to Breaking Bad. And then we get basically the time skip where throughout the entire series we've been teased with these moments where Saul or Gene is working in a Cinnabon in
Yeah.
is it Canada or just somewhere in North America?
No, it was in Arkansas.
Arkansas, yeah. And we get these moments, like, they're just teased
No,
throughout.
Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, they're teased throughout the entire show, and we finally hit that point in the timeline where we go into this, where Saul is no longer Saul, but he's Gene in the future after the events of Breaking Bad. We get to see what happened to Saul Goodman after Walter White's death. It's all in black and white, and it's a big tonal shift from the show, and it's 4 episodes long. Like, generally, if you were going to do this kind of thing, most shows would probably try and do it in 1 episode, but we actually get 4 entire episodes of this whole storyline. What did you think about the whole final stretch of this show, wrapping up the series?
Okay, so we haven't talked much criticism. So I think this might be a nitpick more than any criticism, honestly. But I did find it kind of strange that after, Kim said, the things we've done led to an innocent man's death, and we're toxic for each other, and I can't take it anymore. And she leaves, and then it just smash cuts to him fully being the character, the persona of Saul Goodman.
Yeah.
And at this point of his life, he's been Saul Goodman for years, because Kim leaving him was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now there's no more morality anymore. I will say this: I wish we got what out of those 4 last episodes, because honestly, they could have ended the show right there once he fully transformed into Saul Goodman, and then just let Breaking Bad play.
They could have, yeah.
But they didn't. And I feel, and then they have 4 episodes that are exclusively a sequel to Breaking Bad, following Jimmy/Saul/Gene.
It's like the El Camino of Breaking Bad, but this time it's actually a part of the series, and it's 4 episodes.
Yeah, I will say this: I wish that at least one of those episodes was all about him being fully Saul Goodman in between that timeline. I know we already saw him in Breaking Bad being fully Saul Goodman, but for a show called Better Call Saul, he's not a full Saul Goodman character until the very end, and then we kind of skip over that in a way. I do wish we got more of that. But going back to those last 4 episodes, again, I think 4 hours is a bit too long. I think I could have done with 2, 3. I think 4 is a bit much, but I get it. They set up the schemes and the plans that he was doing with that other guy, the taxi driver. And I like what they do, because a lot of things throughout his life kind of come to a head. We have that Breaking Bad line where he even says, I'm going to be a best I could hope for once I run away is being the manager at a, Cinnabon in like Omaha, and whoa, wouldn't you know, that's exactly what he does. And there's like a fear there, but then he goes back to his old ways of scamming.
Yeah.
And what I think
it's almost like back to
too,
square one, right? Like he's back where he started.
Yeah, he's slipping Jimmy again. Yeah. And I think what's beautiful too is that he works with the taxi driver's mom, who is an old lady, he was an elder lawyer.
Exactly.
For season 1.
Yeah.
And so he claims to be helping this old lady, which is what he was doing in the first season as, James Morgan McGill. When she finds out that he's screwing him over, she threatens to call the police, and he tries to stop her. And I feel like that's the moment where he kind of takes a good long look in the mirror and realizes where he started and where he ended up in.
Yeah, just how far he's kind of fallen, I guess.
So, yeah, and the same goes when he gets arrested, where, he's in the prison bus. And a lot of prisoners start saying, Better Call Saul. In a way, it's kind of like, these are the people in your corner, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Your life, you've made friends with criminals, and, you got to take a look around you. They say that you're like a combination of like the people you hang around with, right? And at the end of the day, he was around criminals.
That's true.
And he built his clientele, selling those cell phones. And that's why I love that scene where he goes into, he's in his office, his cathedral of justice, as he calls it. And Kim goes in to officially sign the divorce papers, and she moves off to Florida after. And they meet Jesse Pinkman outside, and he's like, hey, I need a criminal lawyer. Like, is he any good? And she says, he was when I knew him, like a double entendre there. And even when he was signing the divorce paper, he was like on the fucking Bluetooth speaker talking to somebody else. Yeah. He completely ignores the problems going on around him, or like, he literally, instead of going to therapy, he ignores his problems and becomes another person. Men will literally turn into Saul Goodman rather than go to therapy.
Yeah, for sure. I will say quickly too, like that scene in the bus with all the prisoners, it's probably my least favorite scene in the entire show. I understand like the point you made with it, and I get the like thematic meaning behind it. I just found it to be, I don't know, it felt like a little bit cringe and a little bit like almost dreamlike. Like that's how, Saul would want for his ego, to have a whole bus cheering his name and shit. But I don't think it was fully necessary, and I found it to be a bit unrealistic. Like the rest of the show puts a pretty big emphasis on being realistic to a degree with the way they like portray things, even though it's still like drama. I found this scene to be one of the most unbelievable scenes for me. I didn't buy it.
I mean, I can see how you got there, and I don't agree entirely, but I do wish it was less of a heroic thing and more of a this is what you've become kind of dealio. Because he did smile a bit at the end. Yeah. I found that a bit kind of cheeky. But my least favorite scene, personally, in the entire show, now that we're getting critical, I think I can do you one better.
Okay.
When Kim is in Florida, and she has, like, that one white guy frat dude boyfriend, and they're in bed together, and he's going, like, yup, with, like, every thrust. That was cringe.
Yeah.
I hated that scene with a burning passion, not only because it's cringe, but it's also, like, I get it. I get that, like, Gene, right, was like, he was running away and he felt like kind of behind bars while he was in Omaha. Like, he was running from the police. And so she also ran away to Florida, and she got, like, a shitty job, like, in a sprinkler, office or some bullshit. And she has a crappy boyfriend who's like, so we're going to do this? Sure. Okay. It's a date. And, like, it just felt really weird for me to, like, see Kim Wexler, who's such a strong character, to just let this guy, like, into her life and let him into her bed and, like, just let... Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I get it. I agree with you, and I get it, but it's kind of like, I understand the idea behind it, right? It just shows, like...
Yeah, it's like her guilt and, like, kind of self-punishing herself. Yeah, like, this is her own person. I get it, too. I get it.
It's just kind of awkward seeing it. Yeah.
I didn't like it, but look, I get it.
Let's talk about the finale exclusively. So,
okay.
With everything that's kind of unfolded before us, we finally get that moment where Saul is arrested, right? He's found in the dumpster, which is just so symbolic and befitting, where he gets discovered in the dumpster amongst the trash, and then he basically gets a moment to showcase, like, his skills as a lawyer, right? Like, all this time we know Saul is like he's a good lawyer. It's established in Breaking Bad that he's like the best criminal lawyer, but the methods he does are so unorthodox. We don't actually know, like, how good of a lawyer is he actually. We kind of get this really, like, cathartic moment for his character and his ego, where he basically talks himself down from, what was it, like, some, like,
86 years to 7.
So something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
To a sentence that was basically nothing. And he whittles them down, and we get that cameo from Marie from Breaking Bad as well, and that kind of, like, standoff between Saul and her was particularly engaging for myself. And he defends himself, he brings himself down to such a low, kind of punishment for the crimes he's committed, and it was kind of like one last hurrah. And then we get that final moment in the court scene where he realizes, like, okay, Kim's actually owned up for everything. You know,
Yeah.
she's owned up, and for Jimmy to get out of this, he's gonna have to throw her under the bus. And I honestly thought he was going to. Like as much as
Really?
yeah, no, I thought that like as close as like him and Kim have been, and undoubtedly have like a strong connection. I was like, are they gonna? Which way are they gonna do? Are they gonna go down the redemption route that they kind of did with Walter, or are they gonna double down? Because the entire episode is leaning down that they're gonna double down on it, and he's going to, like, he's literally arguing and lying and saying he was basically forced to do everything by Walter White, and how he's just an innocent victim and he was playing victim. But then when he finally has that moment, that monologue where he owns up to everything, it's a great moment for the his character, and I think it's just like a great full circle where he gets that redemption. And one of my favorite scenes, and I think while the final episode didn't fucking like, it didn't land for me as much as I kind of hoped it would. It wasn't like a wow, that was a 10 out of 10 episode that ticked every box I wanted. I really did love it, and I think after watching it, I was a bit like, oh, I'm not too sure how I feel. But then upon reflection, like 6 months after finishing the show, I look back on it. I think it was a really fitting and well executed conclusion, and I especially love that scene where Kim's walking, you know, leaving the jail, and Jimmy's behind bars, and he does the finger gun thing, and
Pew pew.
yeah, what a phenomenal way to end the series. What did you think of the finale?
Oh, I fucking loved it. I agree with you in that it didn't blow me away, because to me it kind of felt like, you know how Breaking Bad has like a big gunfight at the end and like
Yeah.
executing of the bad guy? I felt like to me this didn't have that like big
We
woohoo
did
like
have kind of have
punch.
that, because technically the show has two finales. We have like the finale of like the Better Call Saul pre Breaking Bad like timeline, where we do kind of get that like showdown, but then we also have this now post Breaking Bad finale, right? It's almost like we get two finales in one in that final season.
Yeah, but what I mean is it wasn't like action packed, and to me it's not like a woohoo like celebrating. Holy shit, that ending was amazing.
Yeah,
But to me, it was like just it was the falling action of like the culmination of what this ride of like what this character arc finally leads to, and what it leads to is what I believe to be like masterful character writing,
yeah, for sure.
because as you said, you know, he looks at Marie and they say, you know, my husband is dead and Gomi is dead. Like, are you really going to say that you're scared that you know? And he kind of looks at Kim, and just like when he was looking for a job while he got his license, you know, permanent or temporarily put on pause, he kind of went over to that printing site and he won them over. And right when they said, okay, so when do you want to start? He says, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah, it's great because that's
And
like
just
literally
like,
set up for what happens in the finale.
yeah, exactly. And we were talking about the glass bottles, about how Kim will stay behind to clean up after herself, but Jimmy won't. This is Kim finally, you know, all those subtle moments that have been like simmering for literally years and hours. It finally comes into one big turn where he takes the stand, and he has to choose. Are you going to be Saul Goodman for the rest of your life, or are you going to take back your real self? Like, who's you the real you?
Yeah,
And they say, you know, Mr. Goodman, and he says, no, my name is James Morgan McGill, and I did it.
yeah,
I take full accountability for all of my actions. I wasn't afraid. I was happy to make money. I didn't kill anyone, and I didn't see it, but I knew that it was happening. Like, they wanted him to be genuine. This is him fucking being genuine again.
yeah,
He's being true to himself, and he's taking responsibility for his actions. He's acknowledging his emotions. He's acknowledging the truth. Because as a lawyer, like as a server of justice and everything, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I think looking at Kim and her seeing him finally take accountability, because even if, you know, life pushes you down a path and you're dealt these cards, you can still make choices. And I think at this point he made the choice that he thought was right. And I guess, you know, in his moral compass it didn't sit right with him. He didn't want to throw Kim under the bus.
yeah. He
He
couldn't do it.
wanted he couldn't do it. And He took full accountability for everything he's ever done in his life and for all the events. You know, he took the full sentence of baking bread, just like he was at Cinnabon. And he's going to die in prison.
Yeah.
He's going to spend all 86 years there. And I love that he shares that final cigarette with her when she pulls a little bit of a scam by showing her expired,
Yeah.
license. But I love that it's all filmed in black and white, just like the black and white movies they would always watch.
Yeah.
And the last bit of color, it reminds me a little bit of like the Sin City style of coloring, where just the flame of like the tip of the cigarette
Yeah.
is still like showing they smoke one last cigar and cigarette. It shows the gap between them. I think it's beautiful that they go their separate ways because he knows that this is what he kind of like earned for himself. And to me, it's poetically beautiful because it was an old lady that turned him in. This is like Chuck's, fucking wet dream, isn't it? But
Yeah.
also, how beautiful is it that the life of a liar, right, ends with him finally telling the truth?
Yeah. For sure.
And I teared up. It's the only time in the entire show I teared up. But seeing just the black and white and him doing the finger points and Kim kind of being escorted out, you see the gap between them. And it's never gonna, he lost his Kim.
Yeah.
Maybe, and they go the separate ways. And that final camera shot of her rounding the corner, and Saul's still there. But like, now her view and the camera view kind of rounds the corner and he's gone. Saul gone. We, the audience, know that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, but he took responsibility and he told the truth, and I have mad respect for that. That's
For sure.
That is the culmination of his character arc, is him finally taking accountability, and I teared up at the end. And it's not it's not a crazy end, it's not a freedom good ending, and it's not a death bad ending. It's right there in the middle of like, I got what I deserve and I'm owning up to it, and I really fucking loved it.
Me too, for sure. It was definitely like, as a big TV watcher, a lot of TV shows kind of fumble the ending. It's really fantastic for me to be able to like say like both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul really stick their landing. They give phenomenal final episodes for sure. And wow, what a great way to wrap up one of the best character arcs in television, I'd say, in Jimmy McGill.
It feels like a natural conclusion too, because he's a lawyer who commits crimes, and so he falls by the very, standard that he enforces. The law is sacred. He didn't follow the law, so that's what happens. You go to prison. It just felt like a natural conclusion to me, and like I said, I agree with you when you're like, oh, I wasn't blown away, but I was like, this feels like the natural conclusion.
It made sense for sure.
It makes perfect sense to me, and it wasn't like a big hurrah whoop. It was more of like, that's it for you. And, seeing him just behind those bars finally after everything he's done. I think it's the fact that it was by his own hand too. I think that's what makes it more powerful, is that he could have gotten less and he actively went out of his way to choose not to.
All right, so moving on. So I want to discuss our favorite characters. So if you had to pick one favorite character from the series, who would it be?
I know this is kind of like a cop-out, but it has to be James McGill, right?
Yeah, it's the basic bitch answer, but it's for good reason, right?
It has to be.
Yeah, his character is incredible. Like I just said, one of the best character arcs in television history. They take his character in so many unique and interesting directions. The relationships that he has with everyone else as well, it's the heart and soul of the show for me. Bob Odenkirk's performance, all-time great performance for sure. Look, I'm actually going to go, I like being a bit unique with my decisions. Obviously, Jimmy is the strongest character of the entire series, but I'm actually going to go with Chuck. I think Chuck McGill, for a side character, and what he does for the show, and how unique he is, and how he acts as such a big contrast for Jimmy McGill. The value that he brings to those first 3 seasons, and then also post-mortem, how his relationship affects the events of the last 3 seasons. Such an incredibly well-written character. I don't know if he's my favorite character, but he really stands out for me as such a brilliantly written character that just brings so much to the show, in these unique elements to the show that I think a lesser kind of older brother character might not have brought.
I understand what you mean, for sure. I think if obviously because Jimmy's the protagonist, he gets like all of the development, and I love his arc the best. But if I had to try to pick up like two runner-ups, I would pick Nacho and Mike, or like Howard Hamlin. But
Yeah,
that general cast of characters
they're
always,
all
whenever they
incredible.
were on screen, yeah, their
Kim as
performances
well,
were
like
top notch.
Kim's character is incredible as well. She'd probably be like right up there, top three for me with Jimmy and Chuck. Like, and yeah, there's not a weak character. Like, all of the main cast is phenomenal. You know, like Mike probably doesn't even crack my top five, which just goes to show how insanely well written these characters are. And justice for Chuck, because Chuck was right all along. Except he's proven wrong in the final episode.
Yeah, and I also like the Gus's Giancarlo Esposito's performance too. He kept that calm, cool, collected personality. He was a lot more active in this one. I feel like in Breaking Bad, he was in it, right? But he took more charge, because in this one he's trying to build that empire.
Yeah.
And to me, it was surprising actually to see him shoot and kill Lalo Salamanca, like to just gun him down. That's To me, that wasn't something Gus would do. Even though he like knifes the guy, right, in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
But like
You get a more
really like the
personal view
performance.
of Gus's character. In
Yeah,
Better Call
exactly.
Saul.
More personal. That's
I
definitely
love that final scene too with him. I think it's one of the perfect final scenes for his character, is where he's at that bar after killing Lalo. He's won, he's won. It's a moment of celebration, and he's at a bar and he's drinking, and he meets a man, and we obviously know that he's gay, and there's a bit of a romance being struck up with him. But the toll of his life that he has chosen is he doesn't have time for these relationships, and
Yep.
he has to leave. And yeah, what a phenomenal final scene for Gus's character, for sure. But let's move on to our favorite episode. So many incredible episodes. I'd say Better Call Saul is like Breaking Bad. It's one of the most consistent shows I've ever seen. There isn't a single bad episode here, and there are so many incredible 10 out of 10 episodes for myself. But if you had to pick one, what's your favorite?
Just fucking one? Oh man. It would have to be, if it's not Winner, it would have to be JMM.
JMM. Which one's that?
He gets Lalo out of basically doing jail time.
Oh, season
And
5,
he looks
episode
at
7. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks at the family, and then he has that mirror face before he's falling apart. He looks really sad, and that's when he does the rant at Howard Hamlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I it has my favorite moment, so I'm probably gonna have to go with that one. But Winner's also really S tier.
Yeah, for sure. And look, JMM is like the beginning of a really strong arc of like the end of season 5. We have that, then we have Bagman, which is another super memorable episode, and then the following episodes after that as well. Like it's just an insanely consistent run at the back end of season 5. And yeah, definitely understand that one. But for me, my favorite episode of the entire series is season 3, episode 5, Chicanery. Like I've mentioned, like Chuck and Jimmy, their relationship is the heart and soul of the show for me. I love their relationship, and Chicanery is the big climax of that, you know? And wow, like Saul is a lawyer, right? This is more or less a lawyer show. This is this is the lawyer episode, right? This shit is fucking incredible. The amount of setup and payoff, the fact that we don't fully understand like what is Jimmy up to, what's his plan here, right? The stakes as well. Like, this is Jimmy's law career. We know he becomes a lawyer, so we kind of, I guess, know what's going to happen, but it's more about how it unfolds. And the execution of this episode is fucking flawless, right? We obviously have like so much detail, the way that Jimmy brings in Rebecca, Chuck's ex-wife, and just throws that spanner in the works. The slippin' Jimmy kind of aspect, where he gets the phone slipped in Chuck's pocket, publicly shames him, and then we have that exit sign as well with like the electricity being turned off. That shot is so memorable for me. The performances are absolutely incredible. Chicanery for me was one of the most enjoyable episodes I've ever seen in television, and would absolutely be in like my top 5 all time.
Yeah, no, Chicanery for me is definitely like top 5, no question.
Yeah.
So your choice is sound.
There's so many to pick from, right? There's so many incredible episodes. It comes down to
Marco, Winner, Chicanery, JMM. Like,
it comes down to personal preference, really. And for me, like the tension, the stakes, the characters, the performances, the writing, everything comes together in Chicanery for me. But look, there's a dozen other options that are worthy too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our favorite season. So again, there isn't a single bad season here. I think they're all incredible, all 6 seasons. But if you had to pick one, what would be your favorite season?
By far, no question.
Really?
Season 1 is best season.
Season
The GOAT.
1. That's interesting.
Season 1.
That's
the
that's a
GOAT.
hot take. That is a hot take because I think a lot of people, not me personally, but a lot of people have kind of expressed the opinion that the show gets better within each season, and season 6 is the best season. Season 6 is the highest rated season, I believe, in terms of like individual episodes, and season 5 as well is incredibly highly rated as well. Yeah, to say season 1 is definitely a unique choice. Why is season 1 your favorite? Because I love it too.
Yeah, like I said, it's just the standalone scams, the way that like
Simpler times, right?
not only that, but it's also, I mean, the second episode, Mijo, right? It has Tuco and him being a lawyer, bargaining for those two skater guys' lives. And there's that line of like, he was going to kill them because they called his abuelita a bitch snitch.
Yeah.
And he talks he talks Tuco out of murder. And I love
Yeah.
that he breaks their legs and he takes them to the hospital and they're like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
And he's like,
I
fuck
just saved
you
your life.
mean? He says, I talked you down from life sentence to 6 months. I'm the best lawyer ever.
Yeah, for sure.
And those Mike episodes,
yeah,
when
5-0.
when he drives away at the end,
Yeah.
it's the only season of this entire series that I have actually watched entirely twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, season 1 is the best season. You know, even though season like 6 has my favorite moment, and there's a bunch of other great episodes. Overall, if I had to just pick one, season 1, no question.
Yeah, look, season 1's fucking phenomenal. Like I said, it's probably the best season in terms of like a well-rounded beginning and end and plot structure, you know, like it's very clean, it's very tidy, it's excellent. Characters take the main focus. I think too, like the more action orientated storylines with Mike, they're a bit more like subdued compared to some of the crazy stuff we get in the later seasons, and I kind of appreciate that a bit more. It feels like its own unique identity to Breaking Bad. Like, it was very, very important that season 1 wasn't shit, you know, like a lot of people checking it out after Breaking Bad. It needed to both establish its own unique identity and set everything up for the show, and I think it did a masterful job at that. So I have no issues with you picking season 1, but my personal favorite season, I'd have to say season 3. Look, some people don't actually like season 3 all that much, but for me, like I said, the Chuck Saul stuff, it's my favorite of the entire show, and season 3 is just where it all comes to a head, right? We got chicanery in the middle, we have Chuck's demise as the climax of the season, and just throughout the entire season, like, it is quality. We've got great arcs from Kim, great arcs from Mike, but really the Jimmy and Chuck stuff is where the show shines for me the most, and this is the best stuff that we got of that in season 3.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, and it's in line with Chuck being your favorite, chicanery being your favorite episode, all season 3. Yeah, no, it all tracks. You're consistent.
But like, let's be honest, like all of the seasons, they're so close.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the gap between the best season and the worst season is minuscule. It's insane how consistent the show is.
I agree, 1000%. This one.
All right, it is time. It is time, Axel, for our final verdicts. So we're clearly both big fans of the show, but I'm extremely interested to see what you would rate Better Call Saul out of 100, and whether it stacks up to that 10 out of 10 or 100 out of 100 that you gave Breaking Bad. So what is your final verdict for Better Call Saul?
If I gave Breaking Bad 100, then I think Better Call Saul gets 101.
Fuck yeah,
because
dude.
I actually think Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad.
Let's go. Dude, 2 from fucking 2. Bodhi recommends these shows. I get 2 perfect scores straight off the bat. Incredible.
Yeah.
Why is this show, in your opinion, better than Breaking Bad, and what gives it that incredibly high rating that you've just given?
Oh my word. If the fucking hours we spent talking about it aren't enough. The artistic, style in which the things are done, every fucking camera shot, like him looking at the exit sign at the end of Chicanery, the rant at the end, and then he blends into the background.
Yep.
The way that Howard's blood splatters, just the details.
The attention to detail is insane. It's absolutely insane.
It's beautiful, and the character writing and arcs are so much more intricate and detailed, and the slow burn really helps like
Yeah, for sure.
the characters. And I am in love with everything. I can say with confidence that this is currently my favorite TV show of all time.
Fuck yes, dude. Look, I am right there with you. My rating for Better Call Saul is a perfect 100 out of 100, the same as Breaking Bad. Now, look, answering the big question, is Better Call Saul better than Breaking Bad? My answer is no. But
Oh,
it is not worse than Breaking Bad. I have these two completely even for me. Breaking Bad has a number of aspects that make me a bit more biased than, say, Better Call Saul. Obviously, I watched it a long time ago, right? And Breaking Bad for me was incredibly influential in, for me, like wanting to study film and falling in love with filmmaking and falling in love with writing. It has a huge nostalgia factor for me. And Breaking Bad is incredible, but Better Call Saul matches Breaking Bad in every way. It's a different show, right? I think we have more nuanced characters than Breaking Bad. It's a lot more character driven, even though Breaking Bad's definitely a character driven show. This is like the conflict comes from the character relationships more so than the plot, whereas Breaking Bad is a little bit more plot driven. I think Saul is a stronger protagonist than Walter White, which is fucking
yep,
insane that I can even say that. How? How did that happen? How did that happen,
yep.
Axel? We had one of the
I
we had one of the best fucking protagonists of all time, and a side character in Breaking Bad just becomes better than him somehow. I don't know how, but they fucking did it. They did
Hey,
it.
I never expected the woohoo wacky lawyer man to be like my favorite TV show character ever. Because even like listeners can go back and I wrote him off like in the Breaking Bad podcast as just the cool, funny lawyer character in the
Yeah.
background. Never did I
Boy.
imagine that I would love this show as much as I did.
Yeah.
Because I had no expectations. So to them be exceeded and to surpass Breaking Bad in my view is,
For
that's a
sure.
fucking achievement. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, look, it's a different show to Breaking Bad. Like, it's obvious to compare. They've got a lot of, like, overlap in characters. It's obviously a prequel, but it is a different show to Breaking Bad. But, like, just talking about some of the big differences for me, the slower fucking pace. This is the best pacing of a television show I have ever seen, right? Because so many modern TV shows, it was one of my biggest problems with season 1 of House of the Dragon and then The Last of Us as well, which I've done podcasts on if you want to check them out. One of my biggest problems with both of those first seasons of the show is the pacing. It just feels super fast, right? It's so nice to get a show like Better Call Saul that is a slow burn. It takes its time. It isn't a landscape of fucking ADHD attention spans in the television landscape at the moment, right? Like, everything is like, oh, you have to have big things happen every single episode. Everything has to be so fast. You need big plot points all the time, and it gets shoved down your throat. But Better Call Saul is a show that isn't afraid to take its time. It's not afraid of a slower pace. And people think slow pace equals boring or slow pace equals bad. No, slow pace equals reward. And Better Call Saul is one of the best shows ever for setup and payoff. Rewarding, taking its time, right? It takes its time. It builds these characters. It builds their relationships, the character development, the way the plot unfolds. It takes multiple episodes. It goes over a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. In fact, some stuff we don't even get payoff until the final season of the show. The fact that this show was willing to say, no, we're not going to adhere to the fucking monkey brains of general audiences and have this try and be wrapped up in such a short time span. They take their time. They learnt their lessons from some of the shortcomings of Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is a phenomenal show, but there are times where the pacing does feel a bit fast, and particularly season 1, because they thought, that might be the only season they get. Better Call Saul has the luxury, because they had that success with Breaking Bad. They basically, the writers had free reign, right? The writing team had free reign, and they were allowed to take their time. And by taking their time, we get a so much more rich and rewarding experience of a television show.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And then just other upgrades as well, like the cinematography. Breaking Bad has incredible cinematography. Better Call Saul betters it somehow, right? It is probably one of the best shot TV shows I've ever seen. Not necessarily from like what people perceive to be good cinematography in terms of like flashy shots or well lit shots that look pretty. No, the storytelling through the cinematography is incredible here. The nuance and the detail that goes into little moments of symbolism, or these little like plot beats or character moments or individual lines of dialogue that just means so much in the grand scheme of things. And it takes a more cinematic approach with its cinematography as well, and the lighting. And like, I think one of the biggest episodes is like Mike in season 1 in that episode of 5-0, and the way they shoot that with that blue kind of color grain and how it separates itself, the use of black and white as well with all of the Gene stuff. It is really, really well done. The only cons I can really think of for Better Call Saul, like, there's obviously a ton of like little nitpicks and stuff, and I'd have to probably watch the show again to really nitpick and try and find some stuff. But for me, like, some storylines obviously aren't as strong as others, but that's barely a criticism, because just naturally you're going to have, like, not every fucking character arc or story arc can be like a perfect 10. There are some that where it does drag. Overall, I barely even have an issue with that. And one tiny little nitpick I don't like as well is maybe Lalo's death wasn't as great as a lot of people love Lalo's death. I found it to be just a tiny bit contrived, with like the whole Gus planting the gun and then having this showdown where everything just panned out perfectly for him. Look, I didn't love that personally. I know a lot of people do. I found it to be just a tiny bit too contrived for me, and felt a little bit unrealistic. But other than that tiny little nitpick, like, this show is perfect. Like, the son of a bitches, they fucking did it. They did it. I don't know how, but they did it.
Should have seen, sorry to interrupt. And you know what? I agree with you. I think Lalo should have definitely seen something was going on with when Gus started moving his feet a little suspiciously. But yeah, like I said, my complaints are also boiled down to like that whole Florida scene with Kim.
Yeah.
Some, I think maybe the last 4 episodes is a bit too long for the Gene Tankovic storyline.
I agree, but even
otherwise, to me, those are not enough for me to like mark it down. I think what you have here with Better Call Saul and with Breaking Bad, when you watch these in like together in unison back to back, I think you have the greatest like show.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously I'm so fucking new to this.
You haven't seen much.
Those I've seen in one hand, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right for sure. As someone who's seen a shit ton of TV, like the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul run, I don't see television really getting any better than this. And I think we'll look back at these two shows in like a few decades time, and we'll just think like, this is as good as it fucking gets.
Well, hey, here's to hoping we're wrong, and maybe something will come along and surpass it, even if it's Vince and Peter themselves,
The Breaking Bad expanded universe. Will they develop anything further? We'll wait and see. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me, Axel, in this podcast of Better Call Saul. I'm so glad to hear that you are on the same page as me, and we both love this show as much as we did.
Of course, and I'm always happy to be here and stick around.
And what did you guys think of Better Call Saul? Do you think it is better than Breaking Bad? Is it on the same level? Is it worse? Is it better? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comment section down below. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. This has been For the Record. I'll see you in the next episode of the For the Record podcast.